Hi everyone, please subscribe to my channel. Blood Immortal. See playlist for other chapters and novels. Join now our Telegram channel now and enjoy exclusive early access. t.me/blood_immortal_official. I do not translate the novels. Credits goes to original translator and author of the novel. I only make it as an audiobook so it would be easier to just listen while doing other things. Credits goes to the author of the novel. I convert stories to audiobook for mental health, for multitasking purpose, for accessibility and time saving. Listening to audiobook is also beneficial for people who have disability. It improves our listening skills and improve our English comprehension, vocabulary and other things. So, thank you for listening. Thank you and thank you very much for your support. Chapter 581. Yuan uses the Wanjiamjung to discern lies and truths. The administrator and the numerous errand boys appear, and it is clear that they came to this place because of Bayu. Yuan realizes that they intended to finish him off in this place. They knew that Varuna's words about Vishnu being alive were false. In this place, there is no Vishnu, nor any traps set by Olympus. Yuan sees the expressions of numerous rancors as he walks towards Bayu. He wanted a place like this, chaotic and confusing. A place where expressions could not be hidden or did not need to be hidden. The Wanjiamjung is a skill possessed by the highest ranks in the tower. As such, it was not easy to raise its proficiency, and Yuan's proficiency in the Wanjiamjung was still lower than Son Goku's. As such, it was not easy to grasp the intentions of a stationary opponent, let alone the intentions of hundreds of high rankers. However, in a chaotic situation like this, thank you, Bayu. Yuan approached Bayu and expressed his gratitude. Thanks to you, this place has become a mess. Bayu looked at Yuan with a curious expression, raising one eyebrow. It sounded like he was saying that he had ruined the place, but Yuan's expression did not look unpleasant at all. Rather, it was closer to welcoming this situation. Moreover, he was an unfamiliar face that he had never seen before. What the hell is this guy doing? The black-haired man standing between Yama and Varuna. The Wanjiamjung discerns truth and falsehood. Yuan had only used the Wanjiamjung in combat until now. He could read his opponent's movements, see through their tricks, and even manipulate their actions to his will. The ability to fight and grasp his opponent's weaknesses. However, the fundamental power of the Wanjiamjung was much more comprehensive than that. The eyes that see through truth. That was the true effect of the Wanjiamjung. It's the first time I've used these eyes like this. Was it because it was being used in a new way? The proficiency of the Wanjiamjung has increased. The proficiency that had hardly increased before rose, and he even felt like his eyes had become clearer. Yuan looked up at the sky. The administrator and numerous errand boys. The reason they had appeared here with Bayu at the forefront was obvious. They intended to finish me off in this place. They knew that Varuna's words about Vishnu being alive were false. That in this place, there was no Vishnu, nor any traps set by Olympus. Thud. As Yuan walked towards Bayu, the expressions of numerous rancors entered his sight. Yuan had wanted a place like this. Chaotic, confusing. A place where expressions could not be hidden or did not need to be hidden. It's easier to read that way. The Wanjiamjung was a skill possessed by the highest ranks in the tower. As such, it was not easy to raise its proficiency, and Yuan's proficiency in the Wanjiamjung was still lower than Son Goku's. As such, it was not easy to grasp the intentions of a stationary opponent, let alone the intentions of hundreds of high rankers. However, in a chaotic situation like this, thank you, Bayu. Thud. Yuan approached Bayu and expressed his gratitude. Thanks to you, this place has become a mess. Quote quote. Bayu looked at Yuan with a curious expression, raising one eyebrow. It sounded like he was saying that he had ruined the place, but Yuan's expression did not look unpleasant at all. Rather, it was closer to welcoming this situation. Moreover, he was an unfamiliar face that he had never seen before. What the hell is this guy doing? The black-haired man standing between Yama and Varuna. The black-haired man standing between Yama and Varuna is talking to the rankers who betrayed Diva including Vayu. It was strange. A strange sense of dissonance that he hadn't felt until now arose. He wasn't a Diva rancor, and he wasn't someone he could remember. However, the moment he appeared, he felt a sense of anxiety that he hadn't felt from Yama. Who are you? Vayu asked, raising his fan. At the threat that he would Segura kill him with the wind, Yuan raised his hand and brought it to his face. Ah, I guess you wouldn't recognize me like this. Whoosh. Yuan took out the lenses he had been wearing over his eyes and looked at Vayu again. Let me introduce myself properly. Quote exclamation mark quote. Vaeyu's eyes widened. It wasn't that he suddenly recognized Yuan's face. His eyes were revealed after he took off his lenses. Crimson red eyes and golden eyes. Eyes of fire and gold. The eyes that were like the symbol of the great sage, heaven's equal, were now appearing in the man in front of him. How do you have that skill? That's not important right now. Thud. Yuan, who had stopped for a moment, approached Vaeyu again. It's too late for you guys to hide like mice. He was close enough that they could have a conversation. Vaeyu, who had become anxious, hurriedly swung his fan. No, he tried to swing it. Swish, swish, the arm and neck that were about to swing the fan were caught. Yuan's hand lifted Vaeyu's body and grabbed his neck, choking him. What? He couldn't see, he couldn't react or resist. He knew that if he put a little more strength into his hand, his neck would snap. The atmosphere changed as Yuan appeared, subduing Vaeyu in an instant. The rankers who had sided with the administrator. Looking at them, Yuan burned the flames of his eyes of fire and gold even brighter. And at that moment, whoosh, the sky opened up, and an eye appeared within it. The Star of Extinction sings. The name he had taken from Gross. The star sang, casting a dark light on the ground. What is that? An eye, what is this light? Numerous dark lights poured down onto the ground. They moved, illuminating the targets that Yuan had designated. It illuminated the target that Yuan had designated and moved. Turning his steps, Yuan raised his head and looked up at the administrator that had appeared in the sky. To the rankers who had betrayed Diva, including Vaeyu. This is a stigma. Along with those words, Yuan released Baeyu's neck, which he had been holding. Thud, cough, cough. Vaeyu, who had been choked for a while, sat down and let out a rough breath. The light did not fall from Vaeyu. The eyes floating in the sky moved constantly and illuminated the designated target. And you will not die by my hand, but by the hand of another. At that moment, screech, Baeyu's neck, which was sitting on the floor, flew off, and a fountain of blood spurted up. It was after Yama, with murderous intent in his eyes, swung his sickle from behind. Thud, the blood that spurted from Baeyu's severed neck stained Yama's face. However, instead of his face, Yama shook off the blood on his sickle and raised his magical power. Didn't I tell you? It was hard to hold back. Yes. Judging from his reaction, it seemed like it had been quite difficult to hold back. Yuan nodded, knowing how much he had followed Vishnu. Will you be okay by yourself? I don't think I'll be alone. Swish, Varuna and Hanuman approached Yama. No. That wasn't all. It seems I've been out of my mind for a while. I'll help you too, Yama. Those damn bastards. Even if I die, I'll take a few of them with me, for sure. The rankers were burning with determination. Whether it was because of Yuan's performance, who had subdued Baeyu in an instant, or because they had gained strength from Yama's movement, they seemed to have made up their minds to fight. I see. Yuan nodded and rested his hand on Yama's shoulder. I know one thing. What do you mean? Those guys didn't betray Diva simply because they were afraid of dying. Yama's eyes wavered at Yuan's words. I thought so. Quite a few had gone over to the administrator's side. There were too many to have simply gone over because they were afraid of dying. Perhaps there was something more than just simple intimidation. Have you made up your mind? If my actions now are wrong. Clang, crossing his two sickles, Yama once again showed his determined eyes. I will go to hell and apologize to them. Yeah, well. Yuan turned his head and looked up at the administrator who had appeared in the sky. You guys can figure it out amongst yourselves. He had no intention of getting involved in a children's fight. His role was over. Now that he could distinguish between friend and foe, it was up to the Diva rankers, including Yama, to take care of the internal fighting. From now on, Yuan had only one thing to do. Come down. The administrator who had appeared with the errand boys. He had to cut her throat. Or should I go up? Was it because of Yuan's provocation? The administrator left the errand boys behind and came down to Yuan. He could feel the world's mana moving with her. This was the first time Yuan had met an administrator of this level. So you're Kim Yuan. Snap. The administrator, who had descended to the stage, licked her lips as she looked at Yuan. A beautiful woman who could captivate anyone's eyes, she scanned Yuan with her sparkling eyes. Your face is quite handsome but you smell dangerous. 3 administrators had already died at Yuan's hands. The administrators' plan to use the heavenly war to devour the heavenly realm had been thwarted because of Yuan right before their eyes. Of course, even when she heard the news, she didn't fully believe it. Naturally, all the players in this world were under the surveillance of the Administration Bureau. The administrators, who were authorized by the system to conduct the test, could obtain information on various rankers, and among them, those with special powers were classified separately as key figures. Administrators were the ones who administered the tests. It was impossible for them to miss a player with this level of skill. Even so, how did you do that? How did you get that name? What Yuan had shown was not the power of a player, but the power of the tower outside. Swoosh, the mana of the world is hostile to you. In response to her murderous intent, the mana around them pressed down on Yuan's body. Are you one of them too? A man with the name of an outer. Yuan's existence was bound to be a thorn in the side of the administrators, who had feared the outer, including Yog Sothoth, for ages. Clack, Yuan slowly approached the administrator. Yuan, who had been staring into her eyes, spoke instead of answering. I killed Vishnu. Guru, Lord of Mana, resists, Lord of Mana. The world's mana feels confused. The administrator's eyes widened. This time, his surprise was even greater than before. How did you? Lord of Mana, a special authority granted only to man, among the administrators who ruled the tower. Yuan possessed that very authority. Is there a guy on the player's side among us? No, if that were the case, what would the author's name be? And what's more, that's the Wan Golden Staff. At first, he thought that Yuan was just a remnant of the outer gods who had survived the war 10 years ago and had been hiding in the tower. However, not only did he possess the powers of the outer gods and the administrator, but he also had the Wan Golden Staff, a symbol of the heavenly demon cult. Why are you so surprised? You're not answering. You should be the one answering. What exactly are you? Do I have to say this for you to answer? Feeling impatient with the circular conversation, Yuan sighed. In fact, it wasn't a secret. He never intended to hide it in the first place. The only reason they didn't know him was because they had forgotten about him. Kim Yuan, the administrator tilted his head as if asking who that was. For a while, the administrator looked as if he vaguely remembered the name, but when he couldn't recall anything, he asked. Why do you care about Vishnu's death? What was your relationship with him? Vishnu. He was the highest ranker who had existed at the peak of the tower for many years, even before Zeus had achieved his divine status. As such, he was always under the surveillance of the Administration Bureau. In short, this Kim Yuan in front of him had never come into contact with Vishnu. However, we were friends. Yuan, the man in front of him, claimed that he and Vishnu were friends. And at that moment, so this time, don't ask me any questions or talk nonsense, and just answer properly. Enemy of the Otherworld confronts, Chattagua. Otherworld Sword Second reacts to, Chattagua. Creepy. Along with the message that popped up in his head, Chattagua, the administrator of the 94th floor, felt a sense of fear that he had never felt before. Vishnu, did you kill him? Chapter 582. A sword entwined with divine power threatened Chattagua. Natural enemy. A chain of relationships between predator and prey determined by genes from birth. However, it was always the lower-ranking prey that felt and lived it. What the heck is this? Thud. And of course, that story did not apply to the administrator. You, what the hell are you? For a long time, they had existed as kings and gods under the guise of administrator. Furthermore, Chattagua was the 94th floor among such administrators. In other words, she was the 7th from the top. She was so far, so very far from being prey that the emotion she was feeling now could not help but be unfamiliar. I'm starting to get a little annoyed. Screech. Was the sound of a sword being drawn this creepy? I told you to answer me. Rumble. Swish. Yuan's sword swung like flames. It was fast, but it was clear. The sword entwined with lightning was heading towards her. Even the sight of the tip of the sword cutting her body in half. However, she couldn't react. The moment she tried to react, Otherworld's adversary opposes you. The system that had been the exclusive property of the players. It was because it had bound the administrator, Chattagua. Roar. The severed arm flew in front of Chattagua's eyes, spraying blood. An arm or two didn't matter, but seeing her own arm fall to the ground was not a pleasant feeling. Moreover, the fact that it could have been her neck or heart instead of her arm was even more gruesome. Thud, thud, blood from the severed arm poured onto the ground. Normally, she would have tried to stop the bleeding, but Chattagua did not. She narrowly avoided Yuan's sword and looked closely at the familiar energy in Yuan's sword. This time it's lightning. Crackle, crackle. The residual heat that remained even after it had been released with one swing. There were many players who wielded the power of the electric attribute, but there were very few players who wielded such fast and sharp power. Zeus, Hercules, Hargan. And one more. No, a being who used a power closer to Uranus than them appeared before her eyes. She had been caught off guard again. You, what the hell are you? As she was about to do so, Chautauqua sighed and stretched out her severed arm. Boom, an arm rising from the cut surface. She slowly clenched and unclenched her hand, unfamiliar with the newly created arm, and opened her mouth. Didn't you ask me earlier if I was the one who killed Vishnu? Yuan, who was about to swing his sword again at Chautauqua's words, stopped. It wasn't me, but my younger sibling. No, my older sibling. Anyway, that guy is resting downstairs right now. He got badly hurt while fighting Vishnu, the idiot. Two administrators who resembled each other. They were twins, and their names were similar as well. Are you talking about Chautauqua? I guess there's nothing more to be surprised about. What the hell are you? How do you even know our names? Do you think I only know your names? Chautauqua froze at Yuan's gaze. Eyes that seemed to see through her. Now, it was hard to guess how much he really knew. Anyway, it's not you, is it? Yuan nodded. Chautauqua, that guy can be confusing. Chautauqua and Chautauqua, the two were more than just twins. They were originally one and then became two. That was why it was not strange to be confused. How much do you know? At Chautauqua's question, Yuan answered without hesitation. Everything. Boom. Otherworld sword second opposes Chautauqua. Yuan gripped the sword and approached Chautauqua. Who you are, why you've crawled all the way here. Whoosh. The sword wrapped in divine power threatened Chautauqua. In that moment, Chautauqua felt as if her neck was about to be cut off, so she distanced herself from Yuan as if she were running away. Block it. At her cry, the errand boys came down. Numerous errand boys blocking Yuan's path. Using them as a shield to buy time, Chautauqua touched the nape of her neck. That guy is our natural enemy. The sword Yuan held in his hand. And even the divine power he possessed. For some unknown reason, they clearly possessed a power that was like the nemesis of the administrators, who were managers. No, to be precise. It's not just us. Outer. That power would be a natural enemy to them as well as to us. Isn't that ridiculous? It was confusing. An existence possessing a power that was a natural enemy to the outer, and of course their power, but also the power of the administrators. Moreover, the lightning of Zeus in the heavenly gold palace of the heavenly god. Even if there was only one, he possessed the ability to become a top-level high ranker, and he was wearing it all over his body. War Eric. Flames blazed between the errand boys. The errand boys, who were instantly burned black like moths, were burned by none other than purple flames. What? Chianma's heavenly demon sword controls the Dancer of Flames. The Dancer of Flames controls the Flames of Death and Decay. Warera, the giant figure holding the Sword of Flames. It turned its head toward Chautauqua, following Yuan's gaze, who was wearing the heavenly gold palace. He uses Chianma's heavenly demon sword and Tulcha's name. It was hard to believe. Clearly, Chianma's martial arts and Tulcha's name would be in the heavenly mountain of the 10th floor. To obtain that, you have to pass Chianma's test. There's no way we missed that. Jeek. It was then, Chautauqua's head felt like it was going to split open. What is it? Someone's face came to mind faintly. The memory of him, little by little. A strange guy entered the tower. A strange guy. It came to mind little by little. Yeah, that guy caught the Chimera creator this time. Thanks to him, the tutorial is a mess. The first person to bring up the story about the guy was the administrator of the tutorial. His tone was as if he was annoyed or amused. The Chimera creator. That's great. He's been making chimeras for almost 1,000 years, so his skills have gotten rusty. That's not all. Then, Surtur is dead, by that guy's hand. What? When he heard those words, Chautauqua doubted her own ears. Surely, the administrator of the tutorial wouldn't joke around with the tutorial, but it was such an incredible story that it was hard to believe just like that. Surtur. He had been downgraded to a lower demon while coming down to the tutorial, but he was clearly an existence that even decent rankers couldn't catch. That's why the role he played in the tutorial wasn't something like a test. Punishment for those who failed. The destruction of the remaining world. Surtur wasn't an existence that players going through the tutorial were supposed to catch in the first place. Isn't that strange? Yeah, it's strange. That guy moved as if he knew Surtur would come out later, as if it was planned. He knew the system. Is that possible? Normally, it's impossible, but even if that's the truth, I think I'll allow it. That's also that guy's ability, and Surtur and the Chimera Creator aren't guys you can catch just because you know about them in the first place. That was true. Surtur and the Chimera Creator weren't guys you could catch just because you knew about their existence in advance. Right now, even the Heavenly God Palace could barely survive, let alone defeat Surtur. A really great guy has entered. That's right. That guy, what's his name? Take a guess. You'll find out soon enough anyway. The administrator of the tutorial smiled slyly as he answered. Why had I forgotten? What was I forgetting? Boom. ZZZZT. The crimson flame-wrapped heavenly demon sword flew past Chatagwa's side. The burning heat on his face. Hey, did you hear the news? Sometime later, Jodakua came to Chatagwa and made a fuss. What the hell is a woman without a ponytail doing with my sister? But anyway, what's the news? Why, you know that rookie that came in a while ago. The one who caught Surtur. That son of a bitch finally did something. Did what? That bastard passed the Chionma Shinkyo's test. The Chionma Shinkyo's test. To the admins, that was more surprising than taking down Surtur. Then surely, that's right, that bastard obtained Tulcha's flame. Since long ago, a single flame had been passed down in the Chionma Shinkyo. The sacred flame, the Chionma Shinkyo's sacred object honoring the next master of the Chionma Shinkyo. But it was a test that the admins had planted in the Chionma Shinkyo long ago. What's that bastard's name? A player who had obtained power from outside the tower was born. It wasn't something to just let slide. It meant more than just a new high ranker being born. To Chatagwa's question, Jodakua replied with the name he had found out in advance. Kim Yu-won, Chi, the burning sensation in his cheek. Feeling the enormous magical energy in front of him and the divine power moving the heavenly demon sword, Chatagwa gulped. I remember, Kim Yu-won, the player who climbed the tower in the shortest amount of time to become a ranker and changed history by destroying giant guilds like Olympus, Heaven, and Muspelheim. The traces he left in this tower were countless. But why? Why was it that neither he nor anyone else could remember him? Sting. His head, where the name Kim Yu-won had come up, was tangled in complexity. The more he tried to remember, the more his head felt like it was splitting open, and Chatagwa shook his head. This isn't the time to be doing this. Now wasn't the time to be fixated on the memories of Yu-won that suddenly came to mind. Screech. The heavenly demon's sword flew towards him. At the same time, Chatagwa stretched out his hand forward. Geeing. The heavenly demon's sword, which had been slowing down, stopped. Chatagwa, whose arm was trembling, glared and flicked his fingers. If you keep acting so violently. Boom. The heavenly demon's sword shattered like glass, and the divine power that had lost its center scattered. You'll get scolded by me. As the heavenly demon's sword lost its power and fluttered, Chatagwa once again smiled the smile he had lost. Tulcha's flame was definitely threatening. It was a flame that belonged to a higher concept than any other flame that existed in this world. But Chatagwa had confidence in himself. Even if the player in front of him wasn't a player using Tulcha's power, but Tulcha himself, he was confident he could take him down. I may not remember everything, but my opponent is just a ranker who entered the tower a little over 10 years ago. Screech. He could feel the world's magical energy moving according to his hand gestures. The next moment, crash, Yu-won's heavenly demon sword crumpled like a piece of paper at Chatagwa's hand gesture. He's not an opponent I can't defeat. This is weird. Just when Chatagwa was both outwardly and inwardly smiling. Clack, strong teeth bit into Chatagwa's shoulder. His eyes opened wide from the sudden pain, and a sound that should never exist in this world rang in Chatagwa's ears. Bah, bah, black forest goats covered in crimson fur. Thud, you're not Vishnu, who would lose to someone like you or Jodakua? Amidst their cries, Yu-won approached with a confident voice. There was one more person. Chapter 583. Chapter 59 of Leveling with the Gods side story. Outer, the beings outside the tower who terrify the 101 administrators. The administrators had known about their existence for a long time. And among them, there were a few. There was a name that the administrators feared even more. Me, she was in the Black Forest. Countless goats roamed the Black Forest, depending on the name she possessed, and devoured the living as they came. That name should have disappeared in the battle 10 years ago. How? Swish. Chatagwa raised his hand over the head of the goat that was biting his shoulder. How is this name? Thud, thump, the goat's head was distorted. The power manifested at the tip of Chatagwa's hand destroyed and crushed everything due to the condensed magic power. Pop, the goat's head exploded. Sizzle. As it died, the goat's body scattered into purple smoke. A goat that had disappeared in Chadogua's hand like that. Me. The other goats did not flinch even though their companion's head had exploded. Rather, they drooled and cried hungrily, as if they saw Chatogua as a more appetizing prey. Who was it, the other one who was there? Regardless, Wu Jin asked Chatogua who the other one was who had killed Vishnu. Wu Jin was sure of it. There was at least one more person there. And it wouldn't be Chatogua, who was right before his eyes. Just because that bastard has a name, it doesn't make him Shub-Niggurath. He still can't handle the name properly. Regardless, she was preoccupied with Wu Jin, who had appeared with Shub-Niggurath's name. Rapidly rolling eyeballs, she counted the number of goats around her. There are only about 100 of them. 100. Originally, the name representing Shub-Niggurath was, the black goat of the woods with 1,000 young. 1,000. The number of goats that had appeared now was only a tenth of that. It was a blessing in disguise. Chatogua inwardly gauged the odds of victory. I don't know how Kim Wu Jin got their name, but I have to take care of it here. There was a way to leave the place for now and gather more administrators. However, Chatogua was determined to finish it here, as he did not know when or how the being before him would grow stronger. I wish you had stayed hidden a little longer. Screech. Magic power gathered at the tip of Chatogua's hand. Don't you think so, Kim Wu Jin? It was enough magic power to turn the area into ruins. To her, who treated all the magic power in the atmosphere as her own, space and distance meant nothing. However, Wu Jin didn't seem to be interested in her technique. Do you remember now? Yes, not everything. Why did I forget? Someone like you. Even though some of her memories had returned, she still didn't know why. It seemed like it would take her a while to think about it, but now she was in the middle of a battle. She could find out the reason later. Before that, I know for sure that I shouldn't give you any more time. She was going to cut off Wu Jin's breath before her. Growl. The surrounding goats howled, the pressure of the enormous magic power. There was an illusion that the sky was gradually getting closer. The goats knelt down at the sensation of their bodies being crushed. Yama and the other diva rankers stopped fighting at the illusion that a huge monster called the world was moving. What kind of magic power? Is it the administrator? Lord Vishnu with such a guy? The rankers were frozen by the enormous magic power emitted by the administrator. Yama also muttered as he looked at Chatogua from a distance. Does it mean that the world's magical power can all be his? He was not afraid to die. However, as a ranker who had realized magical power and treated it like a part of his body, it was impossible not to tremble at the moment he felt such power. Yama, who was holding the sickle, clenched his fist. Now was not the time to stop because he was scared. Let's run away. At first, it was a small voice. When some of his colleagues nearby looked at him at his words, Yama turned his head and shouted. As far as possible, swish, thud. As soon as the words fell, Diva's rankers began to run in the opposite direction of Chatogua. And at that moment, the place where they were standing was hollowed out and a huge tree branch broke and fell down. Thud, thud, the trees that Vishnu had created exploded from within. Some were crushed, and others exploded. The irregular flow of magical power made it impossible to tell in what form the power would manifest. Clatter. The bodies of the goats were crushed. The goats that had been howling at Chatogua scattered into purple smoke one by one. How noisy, Yuan muttered as he watched such Chatogua. Still, it would be a little inconvenient if something like that exploded. Yuan's gaze turned to Diva's rankers, who were running far away. They moved quickly though, they were all quite far away. However, it seemed like it would take some time to get to a safe zone. I didn't really want to write that guy's name. Among the many abilities and names, the first name that came to mind. Yuan sighed as he recalled the name. I should have just come alone. His worries did not last long. Anyway, if he was going to use it, there was no reason to increase the damage with unnecessary stubbornness. Hiss, hiss, black air flowed from Yuan's feet. At that moment of determination. Goodbye, Kim Yuan. Kuo. With Chatogua at its center, the world turned white. All vision turned white. Magic particles without color devoured the atmosphere. The magical power with great force devoured everything that passed by. Ha, ha, Chatogua exhaled roughly amidst the pure white magic particles. His whole body screamed. It had been a long time since he had moved so much magical power at once. Did I overdo it? It seemed like he would have to sleep for at least a few months to recover his body. By then, Jitaku, who had already recovered, would probably be laughing at him. Flick. Fortunately, I got rid of the root of the problem. Hiss, hiss. At that moment, a new color was added amidst the pure white magic particles. A black air current that devoured magical power. It started from a small dot and quickly grew larger. What is that? Whoa! The black air current collided with the magic particles and prevented the magic power from spreading any further. No, it wasn't just blocking it. It's devouring it, all the magic power in this world. A power that devoured magic power. Such a power could not be common. Above all, there was no such skill that surpassed the authority of an administrator within his knowledge. Soon, Chattagwa's eyes opened wide as he identified the black air current. No way, foolish chaos, is devouring Chattagwa's magical power. Chaos, foolish chaos, the name of the Nyala totem closest to Azathoth. That was definitely a name that should have disappeared from this world. No, unlike other names, it was a name that could not be used by anyone who was not permitted. That means, throb, his head started to hurt again. Little by little, very little by little, his memory of who Kim Yuan was became clearer. And at that moment, crack, 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 in the middle of the black air current. Amidst the black currents, you could see Eugene holding a large spear in his hand, similar to Gingnur, a darkness attribute spear. How is Gingnur? It was belatedly realized that what Eugene was holding was not Gingnur. Originally, it was held by Thor, Odin's son. Flash. A huge spear flying, piercing Chattagwa's magic power. Kwang, Kiyuyu. A large hole pierces Chattagwa's chest and abdomen. The spear that pierced her body contained a dense, dark attribute magic power. Near, an item with the exact opposite attribute of light, modeled after Gingnur. That item, which should have been with the goblins, was in Eugene's hands. Cuck, cough, Chattagwa, with a large hole in her body, collapsed on the floor, losing strength. Before she knew it, the technique she had created was devoured by chaos and disappeared, and the surroundings were filled with nothing but the energy of foolish chaos. If she had been an ordinary ranker, she would have died instantly. However, as a manager, she did not die instantly and tried to recover her body somehow. Thud, thud, blood pouring onto the floor. In her gradually dimming consciousness, Chattagwa felt Eugene approaching. It wasn't that I couldn't handle Shub-Niggurath's name. Flicker, flicker, the great chaos surrounding her. If Eugene wanted to, he could cover her all at once and use it as a medium to grow chaos. Those who could handle the name of chaos to this extent could not have failed to handle the name of Shub-Niggurath. Besides, it's not just the name. Our authority, Wan Jiamjung, Qianmaryang, and Near. Chattagwa, who barely raised her head, looked up at Eugene, who had come close to her nose. Perfect, he seemed like someone who had been carved for this day. A perfect player with no weaknesses. A complete body that combined the strengths of Odin, the heavenly demon great saint, Zeus, and other high rankers who ruled the tower. At that moment on the verge of death, Chattagwa recalled. He has been revived. The day when the managers gathered in one place more than 10 years ago. They brought up a name they had long forgotten. Azathoth. The moment that name was mentioned, the managers noticed one person. The administrator of the tutorial. The one who had the egg containing the true name of Azathoth. Where the hell did you get that? I remembered. All of it, it wasn't gone. Kim Yu-won, he got the egg. He hatched the egg containing the true name of Azathoth, gained the name, and also gained the memory of Azathoth contained in Pandora. That's how he became Azathoth. I guess you remember everything now. Swoosh. Chattagwa flinched as Eugene bent his knees to meet her eye level. She couldn't bear to look Eugene in the eye. He had lost his name now, but he was definitely Azathoth. The one who knew the secrets of this world. Also, the one who was the master of all names. It was only natural for her to feel fear from such a being as a manager. Eugene glared at Chattagwa, who bowed her head like that, his golden eyes blazing. As the one on the 100th floor that guy the first no. Cringe. Chattagwa's shoulders shook, she couldn't answer. She knew who, that guy, Eugene was asking about, but she couldn't speak. Tut, tut, I have to tell him. The eyes of her bowed head wavered. I have to tell everyone. After the war, the managers decided. Let's drive out the huge guilds that dominate the tower and let everyone know who the master of this world is. But they didn't know, this guy is alive, who they had forgotten. Chapter 584. Azathoth's existence was also a big variable for the administrators. Above all, his existence was a trump card that could win the war against the outer gods, but it was also something that could destroy the tower. That's why they initially pointed fingers at the tutorial administrator who had his egg. Because of you, everything might end. Why on earth did you have such a thing? However, Azathoth is gone, Nyarlathotep, Shub-Niggurath, and Yog-Sothoth are all gone. Judging by the results, there's nothing bad about it. No, it couldn't be better. Originally, everything tends to flow logically. Thanks to Azathoth, the war against the outer gods ended safely, and since Azathoth, who was the biggest threat, had disappeared, there was no reason not to applaud. One thing, there is no answer. Even though Azathoth was gone, the perfect player who had his memories remained. The worst variable that could mess up all the administrator's plans. Well, I didn't ask for an answer. You know, please. His words kept getting cut off as he writhed in pain. His body was not recovering. It was only natural. Even though it was only half-activated, his body had been pierced by Nir's true form. The Dark Attribute's magic was corrosive. Even for Chautauqua, a high-level administrator, it was difficult to recover. Please let us take back our world. No, Wu Yun shook his head. This is our world. We are the ones who protected it. Thud, Wu Yun's teeth clenched as he continued speaking. Administrator, the great beings who govern the order of this tower. However, after learning their true nature, Wu Yun couldn't help but feel angry. When we were fighting, what were you doing? He wasn't just asking about the present. It was the same 10 years ago when they won the war against the outer gods, and even in the future when the tower was destroyed. They never came forward, even though countless players hoped for the administrator's salvation. But, you did nothing. You didn't try to survive like us, and you didn't try to protect this world. Those who stood by and watched, and those who protected. It was clear who was qualified. You lost your qualifications right then. Chautauqua's body gradually dissipated. The wounds inflicted by Nir grew deeper. The body's decay was rapidly intensifying, and there were only a few minutes of life left. He couldn't move. He had to tell his colleagues. He glanced over. Mustering up his last bit of courage, Chautauqua looked up at Yuan. Even if he were to die, he had something to ask. Right now, are you Kim Yuan? Or, I'm Kim Yuan. He didn't hesitate in his answer. It was the answer of someone who had already set his path. And at that answer, Chautauqua smiled for the first time since meeting Yuan. That's good, Pot. Unlike the body that had already turned to ash, the remaining head barely managed to squeeze out the words. With that name you can defeat. Chautauqua's words didn't continue. She disappeared without a trace. Since she had been pierced by Nir, it was only natural. Yuan retrieved his spear and looked at the spot where Chautauqua had disappeared. For some reason, he felt a lingering aftertaste. With that name. At first, she had seen him as Azathoth, as the great and omnipotent being who possessed that name. But after his answer, the way she looked at Yuan changed. What's wrong with my name? His voice was slightly annoyed. Yuan, who had quietly taken back the name he had put out, turned around and started walking. Chautauqua's last words were stuck in his throat and wouldn't go down. He knew why. It was because he thought it might actually be true. The village of the goblins was always noisy. They were a race that was drunk every day. Many goblins drank alcohol and sang noisy songs. But among the goblin villages, a rough breathing sound, far from a song, was heard. Hiok, Hiok, Li Yi approached, staggering and supporting his body with a broken bow. The goblins stopped singing and looked at Li Yi. He's here, that human. Look, I told you he'd come in 10 days. Give me 100 points. Damn it, I thought he'd die soon. Isn't life full of surprises? The goblins laughed and cried as they gave and received points. Watching them, Li Yi muttered in disbelief. Did you guys bet on me? His mouth wouldn't close in disbelief. Well, of course. This guy has also gained good fortune. This guy has also acquired the Kiyin. The administrator was dead. The diva rankers who witnessed it gave up resisting. Of course, the player who killed the administrator they feared was on Yama's side. They didn't know his name or face, but they all feared Yuan. Tisk, tisk, tisk. Yama, who approached Yuan first, was speechless as he looked at the traces of the battle remaining around him. It's been completely annihilated. The technique the administrator used had disappeared without a trace at some point. It was embarrassing to think about why they had been running away in such a panic. Take care of the aftermath. Yuan turned around and didn't stop. As Yuan left without any hesitation, as if there was nothing more to see here, Yama and Baruna lowered their heads. Thank you, Hyungnim. Yuan sighed as he received their greetings. It was thanks to him. Diva would probably be in chaos for a while. Almost half of the rankers had betrayed Diva, and after they were purged, Diva's strength would inevitably drop by half or more. Furthermore, Diva was currently without Vishnu, its center. Yuan put his worries about Diva aside for a moment. They'll do well. For now, he had no choice but to trust Yama. The only thing he could do was get revenge on Vishnu. There was still a mountain of other things he had to think about. Ananta hasn't been found even with 900 goats. It's also not being caught by Olympus surveillance. Ananta, the king of monsters and a dangerous being with power beyond that of an administrator. That wasn't all. With that name we can't win. Chattagwa's words. Those words kept getting stuck in his throat, not going down. Yu-One scratched his head. I was just thinking about living a little more comfortably. Originally, he had planned to go around to more guilds and use the One and Golden Belt to check if there were any more rankers attached to the administrator. However, it seemed like he would have to change his course a little. Whoosh, whoosh. Below the cliff, a chariot that had been hiding rose up. And above the chariot's head. Are you done? Pandora, who had been insisting on following him somehow, was standing there. Thud. Yu-One hurriedly jumped onto the chariot. For various reasons, the reason he wanted to finish this task in a hurry was because of Pandora. Yeah, it's over. Are we going back now? No. Wu-Yun frowned for a moment and looked at Pandora. Her face was slightly swollen from waking up from sleep. Nevertheless, her face seemed to glow. Wu-Yun stared at Pandora's face for a while. Pandora tilted her head with a puzzled expression. What's the matter? What is it? Your face. Pandora's expression crumpled. My face is the problem. It wasn't something to say to someone's face, and it wasn't something Pandora should hear. At Pandora's sudden change in expression, Wu-Yun quickly corrected himself. No, it's too pretty to be a problem. Pandora burst out laughing again. She was weak to compliments after all. Wu-Yun sighed in relief and watched her. Should I cover it up a bit? Because it's pretty. Yeah, it's pretty, but Pandora's face stood out too much. It was natural for rankers of a certain high rank to have their faces known, but her face was such that anyone would look at her, regardless of her rank. It wasn't very pleasant for Wu-Yun, who wanted to go quietly. For now, it would be better to move around avoiding the eyes of the administrator. It wasn't his intention, but for now, it was advantageous for the administrator to forget about him. In order to avoid the eyes of the administrator as much as possible, it seemed that he had to be careful about going with Pandora in the future. Is this okay? Pandora, who had taken out a mask from her inventory and put it on her face. Wu-Yun looked at her for a moment and nodded. Yeah, that's enough. It wasn't the kind of face that would be hidden to that extent, but at least no one would recognize her as Pandora. That much was enough for now. But where are we going? Wu-Yun answered Pandora's question about her unknown destination. To Murim. Murim, yeah, it was a place he hadn't been to in a long time. The distance was so far that it would probably take quite a while even by sun carriage. We should go to Cheon-san. Chapter 585. Murim, located on the 10th floor, a world that has produced countless rankers. It was a place where one first learned the basic concepts of martial arts, and each sect had several rankers they were proud of. The Gupa Ilbang and the Odi Sega, sects that were considered the best in Murim. However, none of them denied who was the best. Pock. Hop. Players extending their fists. They were players training on Cheonmasan, challenging the 10th floor's test. Spirit. Spirit. How can your fist be strong if your voice is so small? Hop. Sound as breath, idiots. Do you want to get stronger just by shouting? Uop. Pack. They wore steel gauntlets that were heavier than boulders on their arms and swung their fists with all their might. It was hard to even move their arms, let alone shout with spirit. Some of them seemed to have already fainted and were lying on the floor with their fists extended. And the instructor who was looking at such players. Tisk. Weaklings. Guang Hammock, a follower of the heavenly demon cult, clicked his tongue as if he was disappointed. Most of the players who entered the heavenly demon cult couldn't hold on for 10 days. They would pass out several times a day from exhaustion and often had to descend the mountain. Nevertheless, there was one reason why so many players had recently entered Cheonmasan. It was because at some point, the heavenly demon cult had opened its doors wide and greatly reduced the difficulty of the test. Of course, it's not easy. The passing rate was terrible. It was fortunate if 1 out of 100 people passed the test. Thud. The last remaining trainee collapsed. His eyes rolled back and his uniform was soaked as if he had been caught in a rainstorm. There were no more trainees to train. That's it for today. Guang Hammock shouted, looking at the trainee who had held on until the end. Guang Hammock turned around. As he walked away, the voices of the players who had collapsed reached his ears. Yua, this is hard. I'm going to die, really. Let's try to hold on for a bit longer. Didn't all the guys who made it up there become famous? Besides, these days even the large guilds are looking at people from the heavenly demon cult. There was only one reason why they were challenging the heavenly demon cult's test. To succeed. Those two words were the reason why they had come to this harsh and dangerous heavenly demon cult. They want to pass the test somehow, but the training is hard. Guang Hammock shook his head as if he was disappointed. His colleague, Soshin, nodded. That's right, there's no one here because they want to get stronger. None of them had come because they genuinely wanted to learn the heavenly demon cult's martial arts. The first stage of the heavenly demon cult's test. It was truly a pity that they failed even the basic stage of training their bodies to the extreme. Are the preparations for the next stage complete? The preparations are complete, but I wonder how many of them will make it through. If there are many, 3. If there are few, probably 1. You'll be the only one suffering again this time. Guang Hammock and So Chun came down the mountain while talking. Both of them thought that all the players who had entered this time were a complete mess. But it's strange. As he went down the mountain, Guang Hammock felt a strange sense of dissonance today as well. Why weren't there any followers before this? Up until about 10 years ago, not a single player had passed the Qian Ma Shinkyo test. I heard that the difficulty level was much different. The question was why the difficulty level had suddenly decreased so much. Qian San's Shinkyo wouldn't have lowered the difficulty level just because there were no players passing through. It was a question that arose every time he finished training the players in the morning. Thud, thud, as they went down the mountain. Huh. So Chun suddenly stopped walking. So Guang Hammock, who was following him, turned around and looked at him. What's wrong? Don't you think there's someone over there? I don't think they're strangers, but who the hell? Guang Hammock, who was talking as if it was absurd, narrowed his eyes and looked in the direction So Chun was pointing. In the forest that was dark even in the morning, 2 people were seen coming up from the foot of the rugged Qian San. It's real. Guang Hammock checked the appearance of the 2 people. A black-haired man who could be commonly seen in the Murim and a woman with crimson hair who had half of her face covered with a mask. What was special was the woman's beauty. Even though more than half of her face was covered, her beauty could be felt even here. It felt as if flowers had bloomed only there in the gloomy Qian San. What unique hair! If there had been such a woman in Qian San, there was no way he wouldn't have known. Rumors would have spread a long time ago. Above all, she was a foreigner who had set foot in Qian San, the main base. It was strange. This was the home of the Qian Ma Shinkyo. Originally, no one could set foot here without Qian Ma's permission. You 2 over there. Guang Hammock beckoned the 2 people and gestured. Come over here. It was quite a high-handed attitude. He was currently the first examiner of the Qian Ma Shinkyo. All the players who came from outside the Qian Ma Shinkyo were under his control. Us? I guess so. The 2 people made eye contact and approached Guang Hammock and So Chun. The 2 people who were coming up the mountain like that. Guang Hammock tilted his head as he watched them. I feel like I've seen them somewhere. They were familiar faces. Both of them were. The woman with the covered face and the man next to her. A strange sense of déjà vu. And it was a feeling that most people who faced Yuan felt. And just then, what was her name? Yuan was also feeling the same way. Faces that he felt like he had seen somewhere. For a moment, Yuan recalled where he had seen Guang Hammock before, and the test of the heavenly demon cult on the 10th floor came to mind. That's right, Guang Hammock, the man he had first met when he entered the heavenly demon cult. He might not be a ranker, but he seemed to have a talent for martial arts. Is he stuck here? Guang Hammock was quite talented. For some reason, he had joined the heavenly demon cult and was working for them, but if he started climbing the tower again, he would surely become a ranker. You, what are your names? Guang Hammock's mouth stopped as he was about to ask for Yuan and Pandora's names. May I ask? An unnatural question. Because he was born into the heavenly demon cult and had been a member for a long time, Guang Hammock rarely showed courtesy to anyone first. The heavenly demon cult was the strongest group in the Murim. He thought that if he, a member of such a place, bowed his head first, the status of the heavenly demon cult would be lowered. But, what the hell? What is this? Gulp. When he faced the man in front of him, Guang Hammock felt something completely different from usual. It was as if he was facing a great being that he dared not treat lightly. Is he a ranker who has been in hiding? No, the energy I feel is insignificant. He's not posing any particular threat. Thump, thump, Guang Hammock's knees began to tremble. Unlike his head, his body was talking. It was telling him to kneel down and show courtesy to the man in front of him. And the reason for that, Yuan now knew. The sub-leader of the heavenly demon cult rebukes the rudeness of the member, Guang Hammock. The sub-leader of the heavenly demon cult exercises control over everyone within the heavenly demon cult, except for the leader of the heavenly demon cult. A title that he had almost forgotten because he had not used it for so long. However, it had automatically manifested when he came to the heavenly demon cult and met Gwanghamak. I guess it activates even if I forget the name. Yuan was also half-hearted. The sub-leader of the heavenly demon cult. A title he had obtained after passing the heavenly demon's test and gaining the flame of Tulcha, which was called the Holy Fire. He wondered if the effects of that title would still be maintained now that his name and face had been forgotten. But, the sub-leader of the heavenly demon cult. Thud, the player next to Gwanghamak. Soshun, an instructor of the heavenly demon cult, knelt down towards Yuan. I greet you. Even he did not know why he was doing this. Gwanghamak did not scold Soshun, although he did not kneel down. No, he couldn't, because if he had not knelt down, he would have done the same. Phew, Gwanghamak took a deep breath and calmed his trembling legs and ragged breathing for a moment. Then, he quickly regained his composure and asked Yuan and Pandora again. I am Gwanghamak of the heavenly demon cult. Where have you come from? There was no reason to forcibly deny his instincts. It was far better to acknowledge and treat the other person rather than to forcefully deny instincts. Where did you come from? There is no place to answer. Are you saying that you don't belong to a guild? A place that I belong to. Yuan briefly hesitated at Gwanghamuk's question. Affiliation. It was a very important issue for players living in the tower. Depending on which guild they belonged to, their position would change, and they usually introduced their guild rather than their name. That was why. There is one place that I belong to. After meeting people like this, Yuan stopped hesitating and made up his mind. The Heavenly Demon Cult. Title. Sub-leader of the Heavenly Demon Cult, has been revealed. Wow, the presence that had been hiding was revealed. The vast Cheonmasan shook and welcomed its little master. Gwanghamak knelt down at the majesty he felt from Yuan. As Yuan intentionally revealed his title, Gwanghamuk's mind was filled with his status. Sub-leader. He couldn't make eye contact until he was allowed to. The position of sub-leader meant the successor of their god, Cheonma, and the second in command of the Heavenly Demon Cult. But this man, who he was seeing for the first time in his life, was calling himself the sub-leader of the Heavenly Demon Cult. The system can't lie. Furthermore, this majesty. Gwanghamak barely lifted his head and looked up at Yuan. Is this guy really our little god? The Heavenly Demon Cult was a religious group. The one they considered as their god was Cheonma. In other words, it was Cheon Mujin, the ruler of Cheonmasan and the master of the Heavenly Demon Cult. And if Yuan in front of him was Cheon Mujin's successor, it meant that he would be the one who would become their god. And at least in Gwanghamuk's eyes, Yuan didn't seem lacking at all. Phew, you don't have to kneel. Get up. Yuan reached out to Gwanghamak and Soshun and lifted them up. Gwanghamak, who had gotten up from his seat with Yuan's permission, asked with a nervous face. Are you really our sub-leader? For now. I haven't officially joined. All I have is the title. Gwanghamuk's expression became serious. If what he said was true, then Yuan was definitely the sub-leader of the Heavenly Demon Cult. However, Yuan, who was sitting there, seemed to have no intention of joining the Heavenly Demon Cult. Gwanghamak bit his lip. The words he was about to say were rude words that he shouldn't have said to the sub-leader. Where have you been until now? Are you going to nag me about why I came now? Gwanghamak closed his mouth as he was hit in the weak spot. Yuan nodded as if he had expected that and moved his gaze to the top of Cheonmasan. I'll hear that story from Cheonma. It won't be easy for you either. Yuan was heading to the top anyway. It was the place where the god of the Heavenly Demon Cult was located, at the highest point of Cheonmasan. Guide me. Chapter 586. Mount Chunma is high and wide. The Heavenly Demon Cult was a group powerful enough to stand alone against the entire Murim. Beyond the fact that their individual force was outstanding, they had established a group like a nation. Yuan and Pandora climbed Mt. Chunma, guided by Gwanghamuk. Thud, thud, Gwanghamuk was leading the way. He looked back at Yuan and Pandora a few times. The young cult leader is one thing. Where had he seen that orange hair? Gwanghamuk tilted his head. Who was that woman? The woman who came with the young cult leader. He couldn't recognize her identity because her face was mostly covered, but he was certain of something. He was certain that she was not an ordinary person either. Creak. After climbing the mountain for a while, Gwanghamuk stopped walking. I think you'll have to go up alone from here. From now on, it was the Heavenly Demon's territory. The only ones who could go up were the heavenly demon, the heavenly demon's successor, and those who had the heavenly demon's permission. And I'm sorry, but... Kwang Ha Muk glanced at Pandora. The person accompanying you will have to wait here. Let's go. Yeah, Yu-won and Pandora ignored his hard-spoken words and went up. Kwang Ha Muk, who was momentarily taken aback by their actions, shouted. Ah, you can't. If you go up like this, the heavenly demon will be angry. Yu-won turned back at Kwang Ha Muk's dissuasion. Then he asked Kwang Ha Muk, who was trying to stop them, with a puzzled expression. Why, I'm not here to fight. Because that is the law of the heavenly demon cult. The law. This was indeed Mt. Chunma, and all the believers on Mt. Chunma had a duty to follow the laws of the heavenly demon cult. However, but I told you, this is just a title that I have. Do as you please. It's not like it's meant to restrict you anyway. Yu-won had no such obligation. At the time, the heavenly demon's will was this. Since he had obtained the divine flame, this Mt. Chunma belonged to Yu-won, and there was no need to be bound by a group called the heavenly demon cult. Rather, he said that Yu-won could use the heavenly demon cult whenever he wanted. That was the power and authority that the owner of the divine flame could have. However, he doesn't remember, I guess. The problem was that the current heavenly demon wouldn't remember him. Originally, he would have taken Pandora up with him without caring about the law or anything. But since everyone had forgotten him because of his own choice, he couldn't be too forceful. In that case, Yu-won looked up at the top of Mt. Chunma. The laws of the heavenly demon cult were rules created by the heavenly demon. In the end, in order to break those rules, he had no choice but to persuade the heavenly demon. Let me ask for permission here. Whoosh, flames erupted from Yu-won's body. That moment, the heavenly demon's order appears. The flames took shape and transformed into the form of a giant. The heavenly demon's order. Kwang Ha Muk was so surprised that he almost fell backward when it appeared on Mt. Chunma. What? The heavenly demon's order? A hot heat surrounded Kwang Ha Muk. It was definitely the heavenly demon's order, but it was a little different from the one Kwang Ha Muk knew. A heavenly demon's order made of flames. Anyone in the heavenly demon cult who had seen the heavenly demon's order could never forget it. The martial arts they learned were all derived from the heavenly demon's order, and they had no choice but to submit absolutely to the being who possessed it. However, this is the first time I've seen this form. It was clear that the thing in front of him was the heavenly demon's order. Even if no one told him, it was engraved in Kwang Ha Muk's instincts. But it was different, the only being in the tower who wielded the heavenly demon's order. Different from the heavenly demon's order. Rather, Kwang Ha Muk shook his head at the impure thoughts that came to mind. It looked even greater, even thinking that was a sin as a member of the heavenly demon cult. Thud. With a thud, Kwang Ha Muk knelt and bowed his head. The heavenly demon's sword was like a symbol of the heavenly demon church. Standing tall in front of it was something that a member of the heavenly demon church should not do. Pooh, pure heavenly demon church member Kwang Ha Muk, before the great heavenly demon's sword. I didn't take it out for you to see, so be quiet. Yu-won ignored Kwang Ha Muk's somewhat excessive greeting. And then he waited for the heavenly demon, Cheonmujin's, answer. And soon, come in, both of you. The heavenly demon's answer was heard. Yu-won turned his head and looked at Kwang Ha Muk with a see expression. Swish, the heavenly demon's sword made of flames disappeared again. Yu-won, who had received permission, lifted his head and headed up again. Let's go. Yu-won and Pandora started walking again. As they headed back up, Yu-won thought of the two people he would meet for the first time in a long time. I heard he's been obsessed with swords lately. Clack, clack, clack. The two auras that he felt after entering the heavenly demon's territory. They were slowly increasing their presence as if welcoming him. He's here too. Top of the heavenly mountain. Cheonmujin, who was drinking tea alone on top of it, opened his closed eyes. Guests have arrived, the presence that was felt from the middle of the mountain. They had been sending him signals from quite low down. They were saying that they would be coming to meet him from now on. Crash. In an instant, a huge greatsword swung in front of Cheonmujin's eyes. A greatsword with a red blade. A sharp sword made from a horn of something. It was one of the masterpieces that Hephaestus had created a few years ago. You're too eager again. It seems like some interesting guys are coming up. A tall man with long red hair. He was bare-chested, sweating all over his body, and had a fierce expression on his face. He had nothing to do with the heavenly demon church. It's been boring because only those annoying bastards called sword emperors have been coming up. Whoosh. A red aura flowed out of the greatsword he was holding. He burned with fighting spirit and revealed his sharp, pointed fangs. These guys seem a little decent this time. He could feel it. He could tell that the two who had come to the heavenly mountain for the first time today were much greater than the annoying sword emperors who had visited the heavenly demon until now. Don't be too rude. Rude. It looks like they showed their teeth first. They didn't show their teeth, they just asked for permission. By showing the heavenly demon's sword. Cheonmujin was the one with more thoughts right now. How did this happen? Heavenly demon's sword. It was definitely a power that was only given to the heavenly demon of the heavenly demon church. Furthermore, Cheonmujin had not yet chosen a successor, so the only one in this tower with the power of the heavenly demon's sword was Cheonmujin. That's how it should have been. Someone with the heavenly demon's sword. The guest who had come to find him now possessed that power. He had never felt so confused until now. He was worried that maybe the heavenly demon's martial arts had leaked outside. While Cheonmujin was lost in thought. What are you worrying about? Thud. Diablo pounded the ground with his greatsword, making the heavenly mountain rumble, and his eyes lit up. I'll check it out. What kind of guy he is. A growling sound came out of his mouth. His fighting spirit was already uncontrollably large. Cheonmujin sighed. It was difficult to stop Diablo when he was like this. Are you planning on fighting on the heavenly mountain? Why would I? This is my teacher's house. Teacher. At some point, Diablo had started calling Cheonmujin that. Although he hadn't taught him the heavenly demon's sword, Cheonmujin had taught Diablo swordsmanship, so it wasn't entirely wrong. Are all demons like this? Diablo, the king of demons. His personality was warlike and savage. He longed for battle and loved blood, and he only pursued strength. One day, Diablo went to find Cheonmujin and asked him to teach him how to use a sword. He has an innate talent for fighting. He is already perfect, but he just lacks systematic teachings. Cheonmujin couldn't help but be surprised as he taught him. Others would have to spend years, decades, or even their entire lives to learn what he had mastered in the blink of an eye. Diablo, who had become the king of demons with only instinctive fighting, had become a master swordsman thanks to Cheonmujin's teachings over the past 10 years. Just how much had he grown? Promise me one thing. No, please. Cheonmujin did not stop Diablo. At other times, he would have stopped him, but this time it was a little different. The one with the Cheonmaling. He couldn't just refuse Diablo's help, not knowing what his intentions were. Don't kill him. I have a lot to ask him. Clank. Cheonmujin grabbed the scabbard that was next to him. Some called him a gentle gentleman or a great hero of Cheon-san. However, that was just the evaluation of those who knew Cheonmujin on the surface. The name by which he was known was Cheonma Demon. The devil of heaven. His nature was not good but evil virtue. Yuan did not hurry. He could have climbed up in one step if he wanted to, but he didn't. They didn't remember him, but if he were to jump to the top of Cheon-san, they might misunderstand it as an intention to fight. No matter what, this was the Cheonma Divine Church. It was the place where the most militant warriors in the martial world lived. But, I was careful for nothing. The higher he went up, Yuan couldn't help but regret the slow pace he had taken. The peak of Cheon-san gradually came into view, and the ominous energy felt from it seemed far from welcoming. Of course, on the steep mountain path, a guy they don't even remember suddenly shows up with the Cheonmaling, so there's no way they would welcome him. At the summit, Cheonmujin stood with his sword drawn. His face was different from the one Yuan had seen before. Unlike the time when he had climbed up after formally taking the Cheonma Divine Church's test, the current Yuan was closer to an uninvited guest. I greet the master of Cheon-san. Yuan greeted him, wondering what to say. Yes, Cheonmujin responded lightly to the greeting. Cheonmujin, who had felt Yuan's presence from below, looked at Pandora next to him. The woman next to you is Pandora. You know me. Pandora's eyes, which were half covered, widened. Cheonmujin's words felt different from simply knowing her through rumors. He seemed to know Pandora. Why wouldn't I know? You've invaded our Cheon-san before. A long time ago, Olympus had used Pandora to pick a fight with the Cheonma Divine Church. And that incident was the first time Pandora had come out into the world. That was why Cheonmujin couldn't forget Pandora. But why was it? Cheonmujin's eyebrows furrowed slightly. It was strange. He could recall the events of that time, but he couldn't remember why Olympus had attacked the Cheonma Divine Church. Even though it was something he shouldn't have forgotten. Lost in thought for a moment, Cheonmujin asked, thinking that he had kept Yuan and Pandora standing for too long. What is your business at the Cheonma Divine Church? I have some business up there. Business at my house? That's strange. I don't know you. Cheonmujin's eyes narrowed. Where did you get the cheonmaling? He stared at Yuan's face as he said so. A face that seemed familiar. But he still couldn't remember who it was. No matter how much he thought about it, he didn't know him. But how could he have his own poison art, the cheonmaling? As he was thinking about that, Yuan's answer came. I learned it from you. Chapter 587. Asterisk. Cheonmujin's eyes wavered at Yuan's answer. From me? What kind of nonsense is this? Cheonmujin didn't know Yuan. He didn't recognize him by name, and he didn't recognize him by face. He felt like he had seen him somewhere before. But that was just a feeling. As far as Cheonmujin's memory went, Yuan was a complete stranger. Such a brazen answer. Because it's the truth. I'm seeing you for the first time. It's not the first time for me. You just don't remember me. Cheonmujin's expression continued to distort. From his perspective, who had lost his memory, Yuan's words were nothing short of absurd. But even so, Cheonmujin couldn't dismiss his words as mere lies. This is strange. His opponent didn't seem to be lying. Cheonmujin had lived for a long time, and he prided himself on being able to distinguish between truth and falsehood. It was clear that Yuan possessed the Cheonma sword. And the only one who had mastered the Cheonma sword in this tower was himself, and he was the only one who had the authority to pass it on. Furthermore, his gut feeling, that strange sense of foreboding, was the reason why Cheonmujin thought that Yuan's words might be true. But, even so, I can't just accept it based on a feeling. The Cheonma sword was like a symbol of the Cheonma divine cult. He couldn't just hand it over based on a strange feeling. Can you prove it? I don't have a way to prove it. I wish I did. Cheonmujin's brow furrowed. No way to prove it. If that was the case, then Cheonmujin had no reason to believe Yuan. Then, I didn't come here to prove anything in the first place. I have my own business to take care of. Wasn't it with me that you had business? Yes, so step aside. I need to get through. He thought that depending on his reaction to seeing the Cheonma sword, things could either get easier or harder. If he welcomed Yuan's existence as someone who also possessed the Cheonma sword, things would be easy. If not, then things would get a little more complicated. One thing was clear, there was no way to persuade Cheonmujin or restore his memory. How audacious. I am qualified. Sub-leader of the Cheonma divine cult, confronts Cheonmujin, the leader of the Cheonma divine cult. Cheonmujin's eyes flashed. Sub-leader of the Cheonma divine cult. When that title was revealed, he couldn't help but feel confused once again. Isn't this qualification enough? The Cheonma sword, and the position of sub-leader of the Cheonma divine cult. He was confused. The Cheonma sword and the position of sub-leader of the Cheonma divine cult were both things that he had the power to bestow. Even though he didn't remember, Yuan's claim seemed convincing. He's definitely tempting. Cheonmujin looked at Yuan again. If he had only spent one day in the Cheonma divine cult, he might have really given him the position of sub-leader. Regardless of the reason why his memory had been erased, there was ample evidence to suggest that he was the second in command of the Cheonma divine cult. Maybe it's real. That was when Cheonmujin's heart wavered. I don't know why you're beating around the bush. Thud, thud, a presence that shook Cheonma mountain. The red sky loomed over the tall Cheonma mountain, and a red aura rose up into the sky. Wouldn't you know if you just cut him down to the point where he's not dead? Diablo glared at Yuan with the glowing red eyes of a mammal. Meeting his gaze, Yuan thought that things had gotten annoying. So it was that bastard after all. The enormous magic power he felt from the peak of Cheonma mountain. The leader of the Demon King's army, who had learned swordsmanship from Cheonmujin, had quickly risen through the ranks. Rank 6. Diablo the Demon King. He was the leader of the current Heavenly Demon Church, a disciple of Chunmujin. Wait a minute, maybe what the writer said is true. I'm sorry, Master, but I have something to do this time. Swish. Diablo's greatsword was pointed at Yuan. Are you a devil? ? Chunmujin looked puzzled at his words. Is he a devil? It was strange to ask a question like that to a normal human being. If he were a devil, he would surely have horns or magic around his body, but there was no trace of it in Yuan. But, my eyes don't deceive me. You're hiding your magic, aren't you? Sigh. Yuan let out a long sigh at Diablo's words, as if he knew everything. I tried my best to hide it. That bastard can't be fooled. Magic. It was one of Yuan's stats. It was a stat that only the demons possessed, not ordinary humans. It was one of the few types of stats that could replace magical power. So it was not strange to misunderstand the one who had it as a devil. Shua, a sphere of red magic power was created on Yuan's palm. No, it wasn't a sphere made of magic power. Are you talking about this? A sphere of magic. Diablo's eyes narrowed as he found it. After all, you are. Title, 12th Demon King, meets, title, 1st Demon King. The 12th Demon King's rank is lower. The 12th Demon King resists the 1st Demon King. The 12th Demon King overcomes his fear of the 1st Demon King. Clack. Diablo's lips parted long. You're a Demon King, like me. Fierce eyes and expression. A huge fighting spirit covered Cheon-san. A weight that might have turned the whole of Cheon-san upside down pressed down on the mountain if Chun Mu-jin hadn't put out the heavenly demon order in the middle. Once Diablo became like this, there was no stopping him. What the hell are you? You're the successor to the heavenly demon order, a minor leader of the heavenly demon church, you have magic, and you're the 12th demon king. He, too, had forgotten the time Yuan had passed, like Chun Mu-jin. Why aren't you known as a guy like you? Why, it's really annoying. Yuan scratched his head irritably. He wanted to persuade him with words and let him go, but Diablo was staying in Cheon-san at this time. If you don't know what a demon is, it's impossible to persuade that guy with words. Originally, Diablo was a being who did not mix with anyone. The fact that he was next to Chun Mu-jin was only to become stronger, and there would be no such thing as special camaraderie. The desire engraved in his instincts was only to become stronger, fight stronger beings, and see blood. Leader. After finishing his thoughts, Yuan asked Chun Mu-jin for permission first. Can I fight here? Chun Mu-jin was surprised for a moment at Yuan's ambition to fight Diablo, then nodded. How many times is this a surprise? It seemed like it was time to adapt to the man in front of him. If possible, move a little. It was a problem even if Diablo ran wild for only a minute in this Cheon-san. Cheon-san will soon be devastated. And that was not the picture Chun Mu-jin, the owner of the Heavenly Demon Church, wanted. I'm fine. It's hard to fight properly here because of the other guys anyway. Diablo was excited, but he was in no hurry. Anyway, in Cheon-san, where there were many people, he couldn't fight properly due to the penalty for the players who were involved. He wanted to face Yuan, the 12th Demon King with an unknown identity, properly. Let's move, as far as possible. The four people came down from Cheon-san and headed to a distant desert. A vast and desolate desert located between Muram and Cheon-san. The vast and desolate desert, located between Muram and Cheon-san. The desert, where not even a single tree could be seen, was the perfect place to fight without worry. Shouldn't this be far enough? As expected, it was Diablo who was more impatient. Unable to contain himself, he signaled to Yuan to stop when Cheon-san was barely visible in the distance. Yuan, who had been leading the way, turned around. Diablo, whose body was already burning with anticipation, had not let his fighting spirit wane in the slightest during their journey from Cheon-san to this place. Is it? Yuan nodded as he looked around. They had come quite a distance. Unless they continued to fight while moving their location as the battle dragged on, it was unlikely that the damage would reach Cheon-san as long as they didn't throw out near. Then let's do it. Wait a minute. Chun Mu-jin stopped Yuan, who had turned around to face Diablo. This might be a late question, but let me ask you one thing. What is it? What were you looking for in Cheon-san? All the way here, Chun Mu-jin had been thinking. He had been so preoccupied with Yuan's unclear identity that he hadn't given much thought to his purpose. Moreover, he was not only a minor bishop of the Heavenly Demon Church but also held the title of the 12th Demon King. Why on earth would he come looking for the Heavenly Demon Church now? There's something I'm looking for. What is it? Danpeng. Danpeng. Chun Mu-jin made a puzzled expression. Isn't that something you can see when autumn comes? Ah, that's not the Danpeng I'm talking about. Of course not. There's no madman who would climb to the peak of Cheon-san just to find that. That's right. Yuan smiled wryly. In truth, he wasn't sure if he could find the thing he was looking for here. It was just a step to find a clue. This is where it all started. This was the place where he first obtained a clue about Outer. The place where Tulch's flame had been. And the existence of Danpeng would be easier to find the stronger the traces of Outer's power and name were. Even though it disappeared back then, Danpeng was a being born from Azathoth, the origin of Outer. The little boy sitting on the throne symbolizing Azathoth. That was Danpeng. Although the name Azathoth had completely disappeared from this world. I gave him that name. Yuan had a thin sliver of hope. Danpeng. That childish name had become the essence of that being. I'm still wondering if it's right to find him. Azathoth was a name that had disappeared. The only one who could erase that name was Azathoth himself. Azathoth. That name was dangerous, not simply because it possessed great power, but because of its nature. In some ways, the current fight with the admins could be said to have started from him. However, I think I have to find him. It wasn't just to fight them. Danpeng was a name he had given. The being was not merely a fragment of Azathoth, but a being reborn with that name. Yuan could not give up on finding that being again, just because he was afraid of the name Azathoth. He had thought about it enough for 10 years. The fight that the admins had started was nothing more than adding a small spoonful to a scale that had not tipped in either direction. It seems like you're looking for something important. Yes. Thud. Yuan nodded and walked across the desert sand. He was one step closer to dire blow. The scale that had begun to tilt had completely tipped to one side. So I don't think this fight will last long. Chapter 588. Swoosh. Yuan's gaze turned towards Diablo, who was standing with a great sword in his hand. There was no way that the sharp-eared demon lord hadn't heard Yuan and Qian Mujin's conversation. The veins on his forehead bulged. He slowly revealed his long horns and gathered his mana. You don't plan on dragging this out, do you? Crack, crack. Anger mixed with the anticipation of a fight. Just as his face was distorted, Diablo's mana transformed into something more ferocious. It's not that I don't want to. It's just that I can't. Flash. Diablo's great sword emitted a red light. You'll soon be torn into 1,000 pieces. That moment. Qua. The desert sand was swept away, and the terrain changed. It was a simple technique of imbuing mana into the tip of the sword and swinging it, but it was as powerful as it was simple. The ends of Yuan's hair were cut off and fell to the sand. The moment his gaze turned to the hair that had fallen to the ground, Diablo charged towards Yuan. Shuik. Kwauk. Diablo's great sword flew from several directions. Even from a glance, the great sword seemed to be quite heavy. To swing it that fast, it'll be difficult to just dodge it. Diablo was a guy with natural physical abilities. In the first place, just the fact that he was the demon lord meant that his physical abilities were beyond question. In order to face such a Diablo head-on, he had no choice but to use the help of his skills. Sensory field is activated, expanding senses. In an instant, he could clearly feel the direction in which Diablo's sword tip would move. Pow! Quote. Diablo's expression changed as Yuan's movements changed. And that moment, I told you, I don't plan on dragging this out. Flash. The flow of mana in Yuan's eyes and body changed. Heavenly Eye of Charm is activated. The power of a giant dwells in your arm. Shuik. Clang. Diablo's sword was deflected. At the sudden feeling of his body floating, Diablo's eyes grew wide as if they were about to tear. Cheek. Diablo, who had been flying, grabbed the sand with his claws and regained his balance. He then put more strength into the hand holding the great sword and glared at Yuan. Flames rose. The flames that Surtur desired so much were within Yuan. The fiery golden eyes in both eyes and the giant's arm in the right arm. At the same time, the appearance of two people came to mind behind Yuan. What the hell? Remember that later. Quote. Bang. Suddenly, Diablo was pushed away by the tip of Yuan's sword, who had returned to the side. Am I being pushed back by force? Gigantification. The skill that made the current Heracles possible. However, no matter how gigantic he was, he could not be pushed back by anyone. Diablo, who had received Yuan's sword, gritted his teeth. Flash. Soon, flames engulfed the tip of his sword. I don't know where that skill came from, but I'll admit that it's powerful. The sword, wrapped in flames, turned even redder. But that's not all. The sword began to dance. Heavenly Demon Flame Dance. Hua. Compressed flame sword strikes covered Yuan's body. A sword strike that dyed the desert land and sky red. Heavenly Demon Flame Dance was a super skill that Qian Mujin had created for Diablo, a devil who controlled flames. It was a super skill that could utilize Diablo's potential the most. Growl. Diablo, who wielded the super skill, looked at the place where he was engulfed in flames and was convinced of his victory. How is it? I won't take long. Diablo's eyes widened. In the flames of the Heavenly Demon Flame Dance. Flash. In that, Yuan walked out step by step. You're really unlucky. There was not even a burn mark or a trace of soot on Yuan's face. Of all things, it had to be flames. Yuan could handle mana of various attributes, but he did not handle all attributes of mana at the same level. Fire and electricity, darkness and water. And among them, the attribute of mana that Yuan was most confident in was fire. Giant's flame dominates, heavenly demon flame dance. Fiery golden eyes dominates, heavenly demon flame dance. Flash, the flames that he thought had engulfed Yuan's surroundings suddenly wrapped around him. The red sky and the flames that covered the desert. Everything became Yuan's, not Diablo's. Diablo is the head of the demon king, but Surtur was the strongest of the demons. A demon of the same race and with the same attribute of power. The fire that Surtur had desired so much belonged to Yuan. A fire of a higher concept. And the eyes to control that fire. From the beginning, Yuan was no different from a natural enemy to Diablo. You, what the hell are you? Diablo asked in a hollow voice as he watched Yuan take his flames. The sub-leader of the heavenly demon cult and the 12th demon king. That alone was surprising, but on top of that, he had the Wan Golden Bell, could transform into a giant, and now he had Surtur's flames. Swish. However, Yuan didn't seem to have any intention of answering Diablo's question. His hand stretched out forward. The flames covering the desert reacted to his command. Whoosh, I will return it to you. The moment he finished speaking. Roar, a giant flame engulfed Diablo's body. The flames that had been burning fiercely in the desert disappeared in an instant as if they had never existed. Diablo, who was underneath them, collapsed to the ground as if he had lost consciousness. The heavenly general Diablo wouldn't die so easily, but it would take him some time to regain consciousness. It's hard to believe. Chun Mu-jin was speechless at the situation that had unfolded before his eyes. Diablo had collapsed to the ground. Chun Mu-jin knew better than anyone how much Diablo had grown over the past decade. His skills had grown as quickly as his rank had risen. To the point where he might have been able to fight against the likes of Sun Ogong or Heracles. But, Diablo was defeated so quickly. Chun Mu-jin's gaze turned to Yuan. From the beginning, it didn't seem like he had any intention of killing Diablo. If he had, it wouldn't have ended with just returning the flames. Chun Mu-jin spoke to Yuan, who was walking towards him. Impressive. It really ended quickly. It's because he was flustered. He was so flustered after having his flames taken that he couldn't respond properly. Whether he was flustered or not, the result wouldn't have changed. And the one who made him that way was you. Chun Mu-jin thought of the flames that had disappeared in an instant. There was the demon tribe's flames mixed in. He had been with Diablo for a long time. He was familiar with the demon tribe's magic. He could sense the demon tribe's flames mixed in with Yuan's mana. The essence created by gathering the flames of the demon tribe in Muspelheim. In other words, the heart of the flame. On top of that, giant transformation with Wan Jiamzhang. What the hell are you? The abilities that could turn the tower upside down with just one of them were possessed by the body of a single player. This is possible. If I went somewhere and said there was a guy like this, I'd be rumored to be a liar. It's long to explain, and even if I explain, you might not believe me. Is that so? Yes. So for now, first. Yuan turned his head back to Qianma. Let's find that guy first. Diablo, who quickly regained his senses, fortunately didn't try to rush in again. As strong as his fighting spirit was, so was his pride. It was ugly to challenge someone right after losing, and above all, he wasn't confident that he could win if he fought again. I still have a long way to go. Diablo muttered, holding the greatsword in his hand. He regretted not pushing himself harder for the past 10 years. That's why Diablo left Qianma, saying that he would return to the demon realm and hone his power from the ground up. Creak. Yuan and Pondo followed Qianma into the altar room. The altar room was about 20 pyong in size. Qianma, who stepped into it, looked at the two with a worried face. What business do you have here? Didn't I tell you? There's someone I'm looking for. So who is it that you're looking for here? That's what I mean. His tone of voice seemed urgent. It felt like he was hiding something. Well, he seemed to know what it was without having to think too deeply about it. If he's forgotten about me, he might still think it's here. That was also the reason why it was impossible to enter the altar room without Qianma's permission in the first place. Is it because of the holy fire? Thump. Qianma's shoulders flinched. At any other time, he would have been much more surprised, but his current opponent made it impossible. You know about that too. It's not here. I already have it. What? Swish. Yuan brushed past Qianma, the end of the altar room. Behind the wall where Qianma would normally sit. Something blocked Yuan's view as he walked there. Wan Jiamzhang is resisting, soul pacifying true technique. Long ago, Susanoo O stood between Yuan and Chun Mu-jin. 10th floor player Yuan could not break through the formation with his eyes. At the time, the difference between Yuan's abilities and Qian Mujin's, who was a high ranker, was as vast as the gap between heaven and earth. However, Wan Qianzhang destroys soul-binding formation, the true method of soul. To the current Yuan, Qian Mujin's formation wasn't hard to break through. Waik, eyes that see the truth. Wan Qianzhang destroyed the formation. It disappeared as if the formation had never existed in the first place. Yuan made a slightly awkward expression as he watched the flow of magic crumble. It will be quite difficult to restore. At the time, he didn't have to do it this way because Qian Mujin opened the path for him. The formation that was destroyed by Wan Qianzhang had almost none of its original form remaining. Drip, a cold drop of water fell on Yuan's face. A damp cave. You have entered the Heavenly Demon Cave, Tianmo Cave. The Heavenly Demon Cave, which had been hidden in the Great Hall, revealed itself. Wait a minute, inside there is. Don't follow me. Yuan's voice was low as he spoke to Qian Mujin, who was following him. The atmosphere changed abruptly. Qian Mujin, whose body had stiffened for a moment, hesitated before moving his feet again. At that moment, Skart, a sword blocked Qian Mujin's view. Feeling a chill, Qian Mujin instinctively drew his sword. Clang, peeshed. The two swords clashed, creating a sound like something was about to burst. The sound of the swords colliding echoed through the cave, and Qian Mujin's body was pushed up slightly from the force. Qian Mujin, who had been pushed back by the force, threw himself backward. Regaining his balance as he landed, Qian Mujin frowned at his throbbing wrist. Who the hell is? Didn't you hear me? My master told you not to follow. A murderous aura that felt like his neck could be cut off at any moment. Qian Mujin looked at the opponent who had raised their sword at him. It was a somewhat familiar face. A face he had probably seen once or twice through the kite. No way. Qian Mujin was interested in rankers who used swords. To him, the being in front of him was an opponent whose face and news he had seen and heard several times through the kite. Susanoo, one of the three great evils. Susanoo stood between Yuan and Chun Mujin. Chapter 589. There was one thing in common with necromancers who handled undead. The strength of the summons they could handle could not exceed the power of the necromancer, and as the number of summons increased, each individual would weaken or the time they could be summoned would be reduced. No matter how strong a summon was, its strength ultimately came from the necromancer, so it was natural. That was the case for Yuan, who was called the Star of Extinction that brings destruction. And the conclusion that Yuan came to after realizing that was one thing. There is no better summon than Susanoo. His strength did not come from powerful skills or high stats. Swordsmanship. The swordsmanship that seemed to be made by weaving a storm was the real reason why Susanoo was strong. The Star of Extinction that brings destruction sings a song. Consumes divine energy to summon, Susanoo. Summon, Susanoo, continuously consumes divine energy. Susanoo's eyes lit up. Blue, floating light. As much as Yuan's divine energy was high, Susanoo's power also overflowed. What should we do, Master? If it was the original Susanoo, he wouldn't have asked such a question. Should I kill them? The current Susanoo was Yuan's summon. He acknowledged Yuan's strength and even had memories of him. Susanoo, who was bound in the form of a summon, remembered everything Yuan had done. Don't talk nonsense. Subdue them, then. Just block their way. If they try to come over, subdue them without hurting them as much as possible. You can do that much, right? That's a bit of a shame. Stop grumbling. As you command. Thud. Yuan, who had given the order, walked without delay. And Qian Mujin could no longer follow Yuan. This is it. Susanoo was blocking Qian Mujin. He blinked his blue eyes fiercely, waiting for him to swing his sword at him. Susanoo was a swordsman who surpassed Qian Mujin when he was alive. Even now that he had become a summon, he had abilities that were even greater than when he was alive. Creepy, creepy. Even Qian Mujin, who was facing him right now, could feel it. A murderous aura. It was like a sharp sword standing still. It was like a sharply honed blade was standing upright. Qian Mujin's gaze slowly moved away towards Yuan's back, who was walking further and further away. I guess I have no choice but to trust that person now. The person he had seen for the first time, covered in a veil. He didn't know what business he had here, but he had set foot in the Qianma Palace, a place that the heavenly demon cult had to protect. Dan Maple. He hoped with all his heart that the man in front of him would be able to find her. Qian Mujin sat down in front of Susanoo and crossed his legs, showing that he had no intention of fighting. Crunch, crunch. Yuan walked further into the Qianma Palace. The Cheonma Palace, hidden inside the Great Hall, was much deeper than it looked from the outside. The reason Yuan had come here was because this was where he had first found traces of the outer. I got the name Tulcha here. A flame hidden in the heavenly demon cult under the name of Holy Fire. It was Tulcha's name, and Yuan had been able to get his hands on the name of an outer for the first time. Of course, even at that time, it had been hidden under a different name in the form of a skill. And now that Yuan had obtained that name, there should be nothing left here. But, crackle, at the end of the Cheonma Palace. A small flame flickered, the color that symbolized divine power. A purple flame, whoosh, Yuan bent down and reached out. As he brought his hand closer to the purple flame, he felt a warm sensation. Name. This flame, imbued with divine power, had no name. Flame of death and decay, encounters, nameless flame. Crackle, the flame of death and decay called out to the small flame. Nameless flame, it was definitely different from the flame he had acquired back then, starting with the name. Yuan's eyes sparkled as he confirmed the name. So it was here after all. He hadn't noticed because of the barrier separating the Cheonma Palace and the Great Hall, but it had been different from the moment he stepped into the Cheonma Palace. Yuan had felt a very faint trace of divine power within this Cheonma Palace. Holy Fire, a different kind of power from the flame of death and decay that Tulcha had used. I didn't leave this behind. He had wondered if it was something he had left behind when he passed the heavenly demon cult's test, but that couldn't be the case. It was unlikely that she had left it behind when she passed the Cheonmasan Gyo test, and above all, Danpanai, who was in the form of an egg at that time, would not have left it behind. Roar. Flames rose gently over Yuan's hand. Yuan clenched his hand around the flames. That bastard made it again. Danpanai, that bastard was still somewhere. On a pure white cloud. A white-haired beauty floated gently above it. As if stepping on the clouds, she opened her eyes, which were different colors, and muttered without moving a muscle. This is difficult. Pandora, along with Aphrodite, was known as the most beautiful ranker in this tower. Tsukuyomi stroked her new eyes. Izanagi is not a simple item. An item created by combining the three artifact. Izanagi had abilities beyond simply using each of the three artifact. An item with the same authority as the administrators, or perhaps even greater. Just handling this item for a short while caused considerable fatigue. Building up the stamina for it and getting used to the item were the top priorities. For that purpose, Tsukuyomi had been on this cloud without even taking a sip of water. Wham! A yawn could be heard from somewhere. It wasn't far away. Chise it. Tsukuyomi turned her head, her eyes filled with Izanagi. A familiar face appeared in her eyes. What's so boring? Just sitting still and not doing anything. Sun Ogong, the murderous intent emanating from Izanagi was disturbed. Sun Ogong, a high ranker better known as the Great Sage, Heaven's equal. He didn't feel any particular hostility from him, and above all, he was a colleague of Kim Yuan, who had helped complete Izanagi. Furthermore, no, it's a clone. Even if he was the Great Sage, Heaven's equal, it was just a clone. He was not an opponent who could pose any threat to Tsukuyomi, who had obtained Izanagi. Yeah, it's a clone, so don't be too wary. Did you come looking for me? Actually, I wasn't looking for you. I was looking for someone else. As he said that, Sun Ogong's eyes narrowed. Ananta, I'm looking for that bastard. Ananta, even Tsukuyomi, who had been on this cloud for quite a long time, had heard of the name. The Monster King who was suddenly released. A message about him was sent to all the players of the tower. Why, I was beaten by that guy before. I'm not the kind of person who can just take it. I can see that, but it's hard to find where he's hiding. Sun Ogong crossed his arms while riding on his somersault cloud. He released his clones all over the tower, but it was difficult to find Ananta's whereabouts. He thought that the Monster King would be a simple and ignorant guy, but it was the complete opposite. Ananta, he moved more carefully than anyone Sun Ogong knew. However, judging from the fact that the monster's abilities continued to rise overall, it seemed that he wasn't just hiding. Have you gotten used to that eye a bit? At Sun Ogong's question, Tsukuyomi nodded. A little bit, that's good. Sun Ogong grinned. Izanagi, that eye had a power beyond the Wanjiamjung. There was nowhere that her eyes couldn't reach if there was magic power. Depending on how it was handled, Izanagi could have an effect that far surpassed the clairvoyance. Sun Ogong, who had gotten off the somersault cloud, landed gently on the clouds like Tsukuyomi. Let's find him together. Ananta. Swaha. The heated water overflowed. Yuan soaked his body in the bathwater and looked up at the sky while leaning against the bathtub. A sky embroidered with stars. It was quite a luxury to be able to soak in hot water while looking at such a sky in the cool air. Where should I go next? Now that he had found traces of Dan, he had to keep moving to his next destination. There were several places where traces of the outer were found. There would be traces wherever Nyarlathotep's hands touched. However, it wasn't the only answer to just follow in the outer's footsteps. The problem is time, whether it was possible to find Dan and where she was, if she was even there. There was nothing he could know for sure right now. The intervention of the administrators and the chaos in the tower caused by Ananta. Now that he had things he needed to take care of, he wasn't sure if it was right to keep worrying about finding Dan, which could take an unknown amount of time. I kind of want to learn the self-immolation from that guy. Her body felt like it could split into multiple bodies at any moment. Yu-won got up from the bathtub while organizing her complicated thoughts. Sizzle. The water droplets on her body evaporated into steam. Yu-won quickly dried her body and took out light clothes from her inventory to wear. When she went back to the room after washing herself, Pandora had already arrived. You came quickly. You're late. I ate first. It took you so long. Yu-won's gaze went towards the empty plates on the table. The plates looked like they had contained a feast. Yu-won spoke as she looked at the empty plates and a single remaining stir-fried dish. You ate everything. I left you some. Yu-won nodded at Pandora's comment as if asking for praise. One plate was more than enough for her. She hadn't come to the heavenly demonic cult expecting any special treatment. Yu-won looked around the room as she ate the remaining dish. The hospitality is better than I expected. This was the best room in the heavenly demonic cult. Judging from the fact that they had prepared a feast that even Pandora wouldn't have eaten, it was clear that the heavenly demonic cult was treating her as their little heavenly demon. The heavenly demon seems a bit confused, but the owner of the divine flame had already been decided. It seemed that Cheon Mu-jin was having a hard time accepting that fact. Of course, it wasn't like he didn't acknowledge Yu-won. He'll adapt eventually. Choosing the owner of the divine flame was a long-held wish that Cheon Mu-jin had been waiting for his entire life. Yu-won had been forgotten and the fact that the owner of the divine flame had been chosen was also forgotten, but this incident would start putting together the puzzle about him again. Maybe Cheon Mu-jin would be the next person to remember her. Is it tasty? Pandora asked as she watched Yu-won eat the remaining dish. Do you want some? No. Gulp. Pandora shook her head at Yu-won's question, but she swallowed her saliva. Yu-won continued to eat with her chopsticks, thinking that she should ask for more food. At that moment, while the slightly awkward meal was taking place. Bah! The cry of a goat rang out in her ear. Yu-won's chopsticks stopped moving at the same time. I found her. Chapter 590. On the green grassland. A bronze-skinned man with thick yellow hair resembling Zeus crouched down and met the eyes of a mountain goat. Ananta hummed briefly as he looked at the mountain goat. He looked around and touched its fur. He even curiously stretched its cheeks. Me! The mountain goat cried out as it looked up at Ananta. The small, one-eyed mountain goat was an absolute monster. However, what are you? Ananta could clearly tell. Aren't you my child? The mountain goat in front of him was not a monster. It wasn't a player, a monster, or even an ordinary mountain goat. That's what the mountain goat in front of Ananta was. You're a strange one. PFF'd. Me. The mountain goat cried out as if resisting Ananta, who was trying to lift its cheeks. And right after that, snap, the mountain goat's mouth opened and bit Ananta's shoulder. Crunch, thump, the sound of bones being chewed. The blood dripping from his shoulder fell onto the grass. In an instant, his shoulder was torn off with enough force to tear it off whole. But even then, Ananta did not let go of the mountain goat's cheek, which he had stretched out. Look at your jaw strength. You're small. Me. The mountain goat resisted as if to tell him to stop. Ananta stared at the mountain goat and smiled. Ah, yes, I get it now. Crunch. The mountain goat's head was twisted. Purple blood flowed out, and its cries gradually grew smaller. You're the one from outside. Crackle. A dazzling electric shock that turned the world yellow burst out. The body of the mountain goat, which had been burning black, scattered into purple smoke. Ananta blinked, feeling a different kind of energy than mana. This energy, he had felt something similar somewhere. As he pondered for a moment, creak, memories from right after he was released from the seal came to mind, and Ananta smiled. Was it you? Flick. Ananta remembered Yuan's face and licked his lips. He had recovered his lost heads by eating several administrators. No, it wasn't just recovery. I was going to see you soon anyway. This is good. By eating some of the administrators, Ananta had already increased his head count to more than he had in his prime. Administrators were the best nutrients. After eating the first administrator, Ananta had been hunting administrators the whole time. And that was the reason why Ananta seemed to have disappeared. Of course, let's meet soon, you guys. The prey Ananta desired the most was Yuan. Slurp. Ananta, who had devoured the mountain goat, began to move again. This administrator hunt was the last. After devouring the administrator on the 93rd floor, there would be no need to move in hiding any longer. Next was Olympus, and the goal was Wu Yun, who had cut off his own head. The 192nd goat has been eliminated. Wu Yun, who had discovered Ananta through the goat, stopped eating and got up from his seat. He hurriedly searched for the place where the goat had been, but the location was too high. 93rd floor. Of all places, he was now down to the Muram faction, located on the 10th floor. It's too far. It was too far to travel to find Ananta. Even if he rode the original version of the Sun Chariot, it would be impossible to track down Ananta, who was this far away. There was no guarantee that the guy would remain on the 93rd floor until then. I guess I have no choice but to let this one go. Wu Yun, who had been pondering for a moment, shook his head. No, it wasn't in his nature to let go of a guy he had missed once. I can't do that. He might miss him. He couldn't just sit still and be fooled by such an uncertain possibility. And then, Jiang, the kid in Wu Yun's pocket rang. The person who called was Zeus. What is it? I found him. A statement with the subject omitted. But it wasn't hard to figure out what Zeus had found. Ananta. Yes, that guy we missed. It was as he had expected. Zeus had also been looking for Ananta from the beginning, and Wu Yun happened to have found Ananta as well. Wu Yun, who had released the goats of the Black Forest to find Ananta, and Zeus, who had released the eyes of Olympus to find Ananta, had their timing coincide. I just found that guy too. He's on the 93rd floor. Then do you know what the guy has been doing until now? Until now, you don't seem to know. A voice laced with laughter could be heard through the kit. It seemed that Zeus felt a sense of triumph in the fact that he had noticed Ananta's movements a step ahead of Wu Yun. Don't gloat over useless things like this and just tell me. He was hunting administrators. Administrators. The administrators were the ones who had released Ananta from the seal. That was why it was a problem to think that they were on the same side. He had only thought that the administrators might be hiding the guy, but he never thought that he would be hunting the administrators in reverse. That guy has turned both players and administrators into his enemies. It looks like the end will be one of two things. Ananta's choice was quite extreme. Either that guy devours everything, or he dies at the hands of both sides. Players and administrators, they were both practically the entirety of the world. However, Ananta had not chosen to side with one side and fight the other, but to turn both sides into his enemies. He knew what the guy's goal was. Is he trying to become the strongest creature? It was a foolish choice. It was a foolish choice. I didn't think it would be possible. A guy who walks a difficult path, trying to reach the end. And because of that, Yuan felt a chilling sense of crisis from Ananta's existence. I guess I'll have to postpone looking for that guy for a bit. You're going right now. Pandora, who had been moving her chopsticks quickly, stood up from her seat. She had emptied the dish that Yuan had been eating while she was briefly talking to Zeus. Yeah, now that he knew what Ananta was up to, he had no choice but to make that guy his top priority. He needed to move as quickly as possible before the guy ate more admins and grew even larger. It'll take some time. This is the 10th floor. 10th floor. What's going on in the Muram Association? Something came up. Let's try to catch him on our end as much as possible. Since we're on the 93rd floor, we're pretty far away from you guys. Yeah, don't be late. For better or worse. Click. The call ended with those words. For better or worse. Yuan mulled over the last thing Zeus had said. They're thinking of catching him somehow. For better meant that Olympus had succeeded in hunting Ananta on their own. It meant not to be late to the party that was already over. And for worse meant that the hunt had failed. I have to hurry. It wasn't that he was ignoring Zeus, but he had a bad feeling about this. Ananta, who had eaten the admins. It wasn't a good idea to fight him rashly now that he didn't know how much stronger the guy had gotten. Creak. Yuan and Pandora immediately left their room and left Chianma. Their destination was up. It was the 93rd floor where Ananta had appeared. A light strong enough to block out the moonlight. Chianma poured himself a drink while looking at the sun's chariot flying up into the sky. Pour. The peak of Chianma, which had become as bright as day. Cheon Mujin's face appeared on the surface of the drink that reflected the light. He's leaving. Cheon Mujin, who had mumbled quietly, emptied his cup. The bitter taste spread through his throat without him even having a chance to enjoy the aroma. It was a pity. I was going to at least greet him properly tomorrow. Do you remember who he is? A middle-aged man who had approached him. The Sword Venerable, Shin Muguk, who was one of the 7 pillars supporting the Cheonma Divine Church and was known to be closest to Cheonma. Sit down, if you insist. Have a drink. Knowing that he would have a guest, Cheon Mujin had prepared a cup in advance. Shin Muguk, who had received the cup, emptied the drink that Cheon Mujin had poured for him, then poured more into his cup. Only after they had emptied their cups. I remember everything. Is he really the sub-leader we should be following? Shin Muguk had learned of the sub-leader's existence through the divine light of revelation. At first, he had wondered if Guang Hammock had gone crazy because he had suffered too much recently. Or maybe the sub-leader had tricked Guang Hammock. A sub-leader who didn't even know about the leader. The high priest doesn't even know about the deputy high priest. I thought that was impossible. But, the system doesn't lie, and only I can appoint a deputy high priest. Then, yeah, it's true, the existence of the deputy high priest was real. But it was strange, why had everyone in the heavenly demon cult forgotten such an important person? Did the high priest secretly make him the deputy high priest? No, that can't be. Shin Mugyam's question made Cheon Mu-jin chuckle without realizing it. He laughed because he thought that he would have reacted the same way before he regained his memories. Kim Yu-won, Shin Mugyam was the one who first informed him about him. He defeated Cheon Yong-woon. And then he said he wanted to take Kwon Cheon-ju's test, his friend's test. Isn't that presumptuous? I had him sent to the training center because there is a process, but he might pass Kwon Cheon-ju's test. Shin Mugyam chattered on, coming to find him. He didn't know that he had already met Yu-won during the first test, and he brought him news about him. He received Kwon Cheon-ju's 3-second feast. No, the 3-second feast wasn't the problem. He fought him as an equal. Isn't that amazing? He might really be able to become the Lord of the Holy Fire. Shin Mugyam, who was always so serious, was acting so excited. Cheon Mu-jin had forgotten how funny he had found it at the time. He came up to the 10th floor, destroyed the formation I had set up in Cheon-san myself, and came up here. Yes, what does that? And he fought Kwon Cheon-ju and ended in a draw. Yes, yes, Shin Mugyam's eyes were wide with surprise. The high priest wouldn't joke about something like this, so that meant that a player who was only on the 10th floor had fought Kwon Cheon-ju to a draw. And what was even more surprising was that the fact had been completely forgotten within the heavenly demon cult. Why did something like that? Well, it's a mystery. It was a question that even Cheon Mu-jin, who didn't know the reason, couldn't answer. Cheon Mu-jin shook his head and looked up at the sky. The sun's chariot, which had disappeared without a trace. Cheon Mu-jin looked at the place where Yu-won had left and emptied his cup. But one thing is for sure. We all knew him. We all, do you mean? Yes, it was a confusing answer. No matter how much he thought about it, he had no memory of the deputy high priest. Cheon Mu-jin smiled bitterly without explaining any further. He looked at his teacup again and thought of Yu-won. The Lord of the Holy Fire. The only player to pass his test. And also, that's right, everyone knew. The one who saved this world from the outer gods. This world had forgotten, but we were all saved by him. Cheon Mu-jin finally remembered him. Chapter 591. On top of the fatigue-stained castle. Rumble, rumble. A spectacular scene unfolded under the blue sky where the clouds looked down. The fangs of the yellow dragon chewed on the errand boys and savored the flesh of the administrator. Ananta, who had been biting into the administrator's flesh with blood on its lips, raised its head. I was just thinking it was a little disappointing. Swish, wiping the blood from its lips with one hand, Ananta grinned. Welcome, everyone. 4 administrators revealed themselves above Ananta's head. They all hid their bodies with the same robe, wondering what they were hiding inside. Rumble, rumble, the administrator's castle that Ananta was pressing down on shook. Moreover, the magic power emitted by the 4 administrators and the anger they provoked caused the magic power of the 93rd floor to reveal its murderous intent toward Ananta. The pressure that weighed down on its body. As the magic power he had been dominating showed signs of rejection, Ananta's eyes, which had been leisurely enjoying its meal, narrowed. That ability of yours is really, really annoying. Crackle, crackle, electricity from Ananta spread out into the surroundings. No one could surpass the administrator in the ability to control magic power. But the one opponent was Ananta, the king of monsters, the strongest being in the tower. He, who was already the strongest, had grown in size by eating several administrators. Then, kaboom! Explosions of electricity struck the void in succession. Even though it was just a move to take back control of the magic power, the explosive power was enough to threaten the 4 administrators. An overwhelming difference in strength that resisted control. That was the gap between the power possessed by the 4 administrators and Ananta. How insolent, Ananta! We're the ones who released you from the seal. Do you intend to make all of us your enemies? The administrators shouted threateningly. But Ananta had already made up its mind. Weren't we just extras from the beginning? From the moment it first awakened from the seal? No. From long before that, were we just experience points? Ananta realized, monsters, living, breathing, and with an ego, the significance of their existence within the tower. You hunt us, level up, is that the meaning of our existence? After realizing that fact, Ananta began leading an army of millions of monsters to attack the players. As a result, Ananta and his monsters were defeated, and he was sealed away for tens of thousands of years. Did you administrators think I wouldn't know anything while I was sealed away? PSSHT. Ananta's figure disappeared, becoming light. The administrators were bewildered. That moment. Quack. Ananta appeared behind one of the administrators and pierced his torso with his hand. Quagggggg. Electricity erupted from the pierced arm. In an instant, the administrator's body turned black and fell to the ground. Black blood stained Ananta's hand. He licked the blood on his hand and glared at the other administrators. I saw everything and heard everything. His expression didn't change, but his eyes were different. Within his beautiful, jewel-like eyes, the blazing fury he felt for the administrators poured out. The sound of my children dying. The sound of them turning into experience points, being devoured by those damned players. The players killed them, the players hunted them, but didn't you create that system? It was an irrefutable statement. The monsters were hunted, and the players leveled up. They leveled up like that, took the tests, grew stronger, and climbed higher. And they leveled up again. The administrators themselves were the ones who had created that system in the first place. So I thought, once I got out of this damn seal, I'd kill them all. Ananta said that and laughed. More furiously than ever before. As a king, he had not lost his laughter. Let me ask you, administrators. Flutter. Wings spread out behind Ananta. Do you know how it feels to be hunted? They couldn't possibly know, because they had never been. Of course you don't. You've been in a place where you don't need to be hunted or hunt, high up in your omnipotent seats. The administrators hesitated at his golden, shining eyes. That moment, when they were frightened. Crunch. Ananta began to move to devour the remaining administrators. Waking this guy up might actually turn out to be a bad move. While it was sealed, did this guy's anger get directed at us? We should have come sooner. Originally, they should have attacked the moment one of them was attacked. However, none of the administrators were able to do so. There was a giant dragon right before their eyes. Although the size they could see now was small, they could feel it. Don't worry too much. The Monster King, Ananta. The giant dragon with 1,000 heads, they could tell how much its size had grown over time. I'll teach you. The 93rd floor's administration office. Numerous rankers surrounded the area. Rankers wearing clothes with the symbols of Olympus and Asgard, and holding their flags high. Among them were the high rankers representing each guild. To think this many people would gather like this already. The last time was 10 years ago. It feels like it was just the day before yesterday. This was a conversation between Artemis, Dionysus, and Hermes, the rankers of Olympus. It was rare for the two giant guilds to join forces. Especially guilds as large as Olympus and Asgard. And yet, this many people had gathered to hunt a single monster. Is this about all the people we can gather? Quite a lot of people have gathered. Fortunately, most of the rankers are up above. We probably didn't even send a summoning order to the ones below the 50th floor. Dionysus and Hermes didn't feel much of a sense of crisis, perhaps because Zeus and Heracles were with them. This time, please let no one die. Artemis clasped her hands together and prayed, remembering Apollo, who had become a corpse in the war 10 years ago. In front of them, Hades was shaking hands with Thor as the representative of Olympus. It's been a while. Your ranking has gone up, so your face looks much brighter. I can see Odin in you a lot more now as well. The two people, who had exchanged warm greetings for a moment, looked around. Among them, Thor seemed to recall the events of 10 years ago and made a pained expression. That time comes to mind. It's reminiscent of that time. Zeus's lightning bolts fell down upon the management bureau. From Olympus to Asgard, it's quite the sight to behold. Tens of thousands of rankers had gathered in this place. The combined strength of the two great guilds that supported the tower. It was certainly an excessive number to gather in one place, although it was nothing compared to a decade ago. Moreover, crackle, 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 two people stood in the middle of the battlefield, silently summoning their electricity. Zeus and Hercules, the two greatest rankers in this tower, had gathered in one place. It seems the Monster King is quite formidable. Just look at the numbers those two managed to gather. Our role is to simply buy time to prevent that guy from escaping. I've heard about it, but is that really all? They'll allow long-range support, but they absolutely forbid us from approaching. Ananta possessed the power to devour living beings and absorb their strength. In order to avoid becoming Ananta's meal and interfering with the battle, it was absolutely necessary to avoid approaching him. Nevertheless, there was one reason why Zeus had asked for Asgard's cooperation and gathered such a large number of people. If we let him escape here, consider the world finished. It was because they had to catch Ananta here, by all means. If they missed him again, he would grow uncontrollably large. Rumble, rumble, that was when the sky began to thunder. The dark clouds that had been rising higher and higher had already passed the top of the management bureau and were rising far above it. Crackle, crackle, the electric current flowing out of Zeus's body rose upwards. As Zeus's fingertips began to rise. It's begun. Hades, who had been watching from afar, showed a tense expression. What has begun? Thor also took out Mjolnir and assumed a battle stance. However, the enemy had yet to reveal himself. Despite this, Zeus did not stop raising his hand towards the sky. I understand. That guy's personality has always been like that. Zeus was not the type to take the lead in a fight. However, Hades, his brother who had climbed the tower with him, knew better than anyone what Zeus's personality was like when he fought. These days, they call it a show-off. At that moment, flash, the vision of everyone watching the management bureau from afar turned white for a moment. Just like that, crash, Zeus's thunderbolt descended down upon the management bureau. Beast, kaboom, rumble, a pillar of electricity rose high, piercing through the clouds and engulfing the management bureau. The aftershock from the pillar of electricity spread to the Olympus and Asgard troops who had purposely distanced themselves. Get away, you'll get caught in the aftershock. Guild members with defensive skills, hurry! Artemis, Dionysus, and Hermes, who were leading Olympus, shouted. The Valkyries also spread out their shields with Brunhilde and protected the guild from the aftershock of Zeus's thunderbolt. Once they had secured their safety from the aftermath of the thunderbolt. Rumble, only then did the Olympus and Asgard rankers notice the pillar of lightning that Zeus had thrown. The rankers were stunned, and so was Thor, the leader of Asgard. That's the thunderbolt of the heavenly god, Thor. He was also a player who wielded lightning. However, the thunderbolt of Zeus that he saw before his eyes was hard to believe that it was the same attribute of magic power. To be able to spread such a wide range of lightning with such power. Hades was also surprised, although to a lesser extent. Anyway, he still doesn't care about his surroundings even after becoming a king. Whoosh, the pillar of electricity did not disappear for a while and rose higher and higher. A magnificent sight that was blinding. And while everyone was absent-minded, losing their minds to its power. It's coming. Yes. Thor was surprised by Hades' words and looked back at him. Wasn't it over? Thor's gaze, who asked that, turned to the huge pillar where the thunderbolt had fallen. A monster that could survive in that. He couldn't believe that an enemy would still be alive after being hit head-on by such a thing. That guy's not an idiot, and if it was going to end like this, he wouldn't have made such a fuss. Hades said, stating it as a fact. And as if to agree with his words. Screech. A foot emerged from the yellow pillar of electricity. Chapter 592. Cheek. Something came out. As if something had happened even while the management bureau was flying away in its entirety. Calmly. The owner of the slightly singed hair. Ananta smiled as he looked at the army that filled his vision. How did you all know to come here? To a place where something delicious is. Ananta's gaze, who said so, turned towards Zeus and Heracles. Watching Heracles, who was raising his fighting spirit by hitting his bare fists together, Ananta noticed that those two were the core of this army. I'm sorry, but I'm full right now. I'm in a good mood even if I don't eat anymore. Twang, kya, a dragon with yellow scales protruded from one of Ananta's arms. A dragon that spread a sense of oppression across the battlefield with an unusually loud cry. Ananta slowly walked towards the numerous rankers and spoke in a friendly tone. So why don't you all go back? Then you'll be able to live for a few more years without dying. Just a few years. Mixed in those words was a declaration of war that he would soon start attacking players. However, nothing will change. Chi-Ji-Ji. As if he had known it would be like this from the start, Zeus provoked Ananta by creating a spear. You monsters are nothing more than experience points for players, both then and now. Experience points. And that provocation worked quite well. Kya, the dragon let out a roar. Ananta's figure, who had been glaring at Zeus, disappeared at that moment. Pa-Jit, Kwa-Ang. A loud noise could be heard from the midpoint between Zeus and Ananta. It was the sound of Heracles and Ananta clashing. You won't be able to run away this time. Swish. Heracles grabbed the tooth of the dragon that had sprouted from Ananta's arm. Ananta, who had been running straight towards Zeus, shook his head at those words. I didn't plan to. Pa-Jit. The two disappeared again. Bang, bang, bang. Heracles and Ananta clashed in succession. Raising his speed by drawing in electricity, Heracles spread the power of gigantification throughout his body. The power of a giant fills your entire body. The power of lightning fills your entire body. Chi-Chi-Chi-Chi. Heracles moved his feet, scattering electricity. He was a ranker who was like a symbol of strength. That's why, after obtaining lightning, Heracles had focused on using that power to increase his destructive power. However, I need to be faster. Because of what had happened not too long ago, Heracles felt the need to become stronger. If he hadn't been pushed back by Ananta at that time, if he had been able to hold on to Ananta, he wouldn't have let him get away. And so, after that day, for the first time in 10 years, Heracles went to Zeus on his own 2 feet. Please teach me how to use electricity. Zeus. He was the one who handled this power more skillfully than anyone else. Heracles, who had only released his power without thinking, learned how to handle lightning from Zeus. There are many ways to use power. You don't have to throw a spear like me. Then what should I do? It's not much different from what you're doing now. Above all, your strength is already perfect. It has been since the old days. In the tower, there was no one who could surpass the strength of Heracles, who wielded gigantification. The same went for King Uma, known as the King of Great Strength, and Son Goku, known as the Great Sage, Heaven's equal. A strong body and strength. That was the direction Heracles needed to go. Increase your speed, faster than now, Pa-Gg. As he said that, Zeus unusually extended his fist. At a speed that was too fast for Heracles' eyes to see. Just by changing your perspective on how you use your power, you'll see a different world. That was all, what Zeus taught Heracles. However, just by changing his perspective, many things changed. The strength that he had been using incorrectly until now finally spread its wings as it found the right path. Chi-Ji. Faster. More efficiently. Faster, faster, faster. Crunch. Heracles' fist, moving like lightning, stretched out towards Ananta. Kwa rung. Ananta disappearing with a thunderclap. Heracles increased his speed in order to chase after such Ananta. I can be faster. Crunch. Heracles had entered a different time than before. Everyone slowed down, and only Heracles and Ananta were moving. And in between them, another bolt of lightning spear flew. Kwa rung. The mist spear flew past Ananta. In an instant, the spear disappeared into a dot. Behind Ananta, who had dodged the spear and stopped moving, Heracles' fist was embedded. Kwa rung. Ananta flying away with the thunder. A large crater was created in the place where he had been slammed into the ground. The electric barrier he had spread out to protect his body was useless against Heracles' power. The pain he felt on his back from being hit by the fist. Ananta, who had been slammed into the crater, recalled the link of Zeus and Heracles. They're getting more and more in sync. Zeus and Heracles. The two who used the same type of power had such a terrible synergy that it was hard to believe they were family. A synergy that added 1 and 1 and didn't even reach 2. But now, it was much more in sync than then. Swoosh. Ananta stroked his stomach as he lay there. He could feel the heavy magical power squirming in his stomach. A pleasant feeling of fullness came over him, and the corners of Ananta's mouth went up. Clack. Have you digested it yet? The 4 administrators who had been eaten in a hurry. Their blood, flesh, and even magical power. As he was large, the time it took for digestion was not short. As he lay there quietly, looking up at the sky for a moment. Rumble. The thick, dark clouds squirmed and made a menacing sound. Ananta, who had sensed what was going to happen in advance, got up from his seat. Lightning. Zeus and Heracles, the leaders of the players who had recorded the first and second ranks in the tower. Ananta was amused by the fact that the power they wielded was the same as his. I'm going to overeat today. Rumble, as a small bolt of lightning overflowed from the dark clouds and fell. Ananta's shadow, illuminated by the light, changed into the shape of a dragon. The rankers of Olympus moved far away from Zeus. It was the same when they had blown up the entire administration bureau for the first time, but they felt like they would get caught up in it if they got close. Crackle, crackle, crackle. The lightning emitted from Zeus rose above the clouds. The dark clouds grew larger and larger. Zeus prepared a shot while emitting a golden light. I don't know what you're up to. Ananta, who had been hit by Heracles and flew far away. Zeus didn't bother to chase after him. For him, the strongest spearman, the longer the distance and the more time, the better. This time, it'll be different from before. Rumble. In order to pour out a proper shot, the magical power gathered in the dark clouds overflowed and random lightning bolts fell on the ground. In the process, Zeus's condition became vulnerable, but it didn't matter. Because Heracles was in front of him. Crackle, crackle. The lightning emitted from the dark clouds did not pour out at once. The golden currents gathered and transformed into the shape of a huge spear. Controlling the power with his fingertips, Zeus created the sharpest and most powerful spear. No way, Hades exclaimed, looking at the magical power felt from the dark clouds and the lightning that was gradually taking shape. Zeus, are you not going to think about the damage on this side? The spear that Zeus was creating was so powerful that it had a problem in that it took a long time to use the skill. So much so that it could cause great damage to his allies. However, my brother, please take care of that. If he had cared about such a thing in the first place, he wouldn't have been called Zeus. I have to blow this away right now. That damn bastard. Roar, Hades spread out his arms wide and created a dark curtain that protected Olympus and Asgard. If he hadn't done this, hundreds or thousands of rankers would have died from the aftereffects of the spear's explosion. Kwa rung, the lightning that formed the shape of a giant spear roared. A sharp, trident-shaped lightning bolt. A huge collection of lightning that pierced the dark clouds and rose high into the sky. Divine punishment, Astrape. It was the strongest spear that Zeus could create, Astrape. Eat this. Goo. Astrape, which had revealed its form beneath the dark clouds, fell toward Ananta. And at that moment, bang, kya, Ananta, who had been hit by Heracles and sent flying, revealed the form of a dragon with 1,000 heads. Kwaggggg. 1,000 dragons wrapped around and squeezed the giant spear, Astrape. Astrape, which had been falling down, stopped dead in its tracks. Astrape, Hades, eyes widened as he watched the scene. The Astrape that Zeus had just fired would have had the same power as the Gungnir that Odin had activated in his prime. And yet, to block such an Astrape with his bare body was an incredible sight to behold. Even, crack, sizzle, cracks began to appear on the surface of Astrape, which had solidified. Quang, Astrape exploded, crushed by Ananta's body. It took no time for the explosion to spread to the surroundings. Quowing, pa ggg. The lightning of Astrape, which had lost its form as a spear, instantly turned into a storm and swirled around. Fortunately, Hades was not the kind of person who could not block the aftermath of a simple explosion. The king of the dead borrows the power of the dead. The sea of the dead responds, borrowing the power of Tartarus. Su'a, darkness that counteracted the power of lightning. The two forces of opposite attributes collided and were annihilated. Hades, who had been sweating from the Astrape that Zeus had thrown, glanced at Zeus's back, who had created this situation. There's no way he couldn't have predicted this. The power of Astrape was best known to Zeus, who used it. Nevertheless, there was only one reason why he had used such a great technique. Does that mean he doesn't have much room to spare? Hades' gaze turned to Ananta, who had revealed the form of a giant dragon. Fortunately, most of the aftereffects of Astrape's explosion were passed on to Ananta, who had been hit directly by it. Instead of his body being pierced by the spear, the force of Astrape swept over Ananta as an explosion. However, kya, the real Ananta was spreading an enormous amount of magic power that even he could not control and was roaring menacingly. Seeing this, Hades remembered the first time he had felt the same way as he did now. I feel like I've gone back 10 years. 10 years ago. Beings outside the tower who possessed extraordinary powers. When he confronted and fought them, Hades felt exactly the same way as he did now. Still, it wasn't as if there was no damage at all. A few heads had disappeared and there were traces of burns on his body. But that couldn't be called proper damage compared to being hit head-on by Astrape. As the attack with Astrape failed, Jebuk, Heracles, who had blown Ananta away, approached the giant and raised his fighting spirit even higher. Good. Bang. Two fists collided. Kai GGGG. With that, the lightning that flowed from the two fists lodged itself in Heracles' body. Losing tastes good. Chapter 593. The dragon's roar had the power to make the heart and head ring. It was a common trait of monsters with dragon blood, including the dragon clan. In particular, dragons like Vritra and Fafnir had the ability to incapacitate high-ranking players with just their roars. A type of power called fear. It was not a skill derived from magical power. It was something much more primitive. It was a power that stimulated the fear that all living beings possessed. And if the one who wielded that power was Ananta, who was at the apex of all dragons and monsters. What can we do against something like that? Even Astrape was blocked. Astrape was a skill that represented Zeus, although it had not appeared many times until now. The fact that it had been blocked meant that even Zeus, the greatest ranker in this tower, could not do anything about Ananta. The morale that had been reaching for the sky at the beginning plummeted in an instant. Kya! Ananta burst out in fear. At that moment, the rankers who could not overcome their fear began to lose their minds one by one. That's good. Bang! Heracles stepped forward, slamming his two fists together. Losing has become interesting. Steps without hesitation. Soon, Heracles kicked off the ground. Bang! The sound of thunder roared on the ground. A yellow line shot towards Ananta like lightning, and his fist was embedded above the dragon's head. Bang! 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 A flurry of punches. Ananta's lightning bolts, which had over 1,000 heads, shot towards Heracles, and Heracles moved while receiving them with his whole body. Heracles shouted, piercing through the lightning armor that Ananta was wearing. Losing has become interesting. As if to prove the words he had uttered himself, he truly overwhelmed his opponent. What? It's not working, as expected of Heracles. The morale that had sunk began to rise little by little. At the sight of Heracles, who was facing such a monster head-on, the fear and dread that had been stirring began to dissipate little by little. Yes, Heracles, the great hero of the Gigantomachy, was on their side. Just when their morale was beginning to rise. What are you guys doing? Bam! Thor, who had been watching the scene in awe, struck the ground with Mjolnir and shouted. Did you come here to just watch? We're going to protect Hercules starting now. With those words, Thor took out Gungnir in his other hand. The strongest spear inherited from Odin. He couldn't use Gungnir as freely as Odin could, but although it would take time to activate, it wasn't impossible. Why, yes, protect Hercules. Attack with everything you have. Since he's so big, we can just choose where to attack. The Valkyries raised their bows and spears. The rankers from Olympus also prepared their long-range intercept skills. Artemis raised her bow. Dionysus raised his wine and increased his stats. Athena cast buffs on the battlefield. With Thor's signal, the full-scale attack on Ananta began. He has good timing. Hades watched Thor, who was sweating as he prepared to activate Gungnir. He had given the order just when Hercules' morale had risen. He would have to observe his qualities as a king for a while longer, but at least he had the qualities to lead soldiers. Swish! As the two guilds poured their attacks onto Ananta, Hades disappeared into the ground. Hades, who rode on the shadows, appeared behind Zeus. What do you think? Bam! Hercules was still pressing Ananta. He was releasing the power of lightning without rest. He moved between the heads, throwing punches and swinging his club. He seemed to be overwhelming Ananta. But Zeus shook his head. We can't catch him with just us. Are you sure? Yes. Crack. Zeus looked at Hercules, who had grabbed Ananta's leg and lifted him up. That guy is pushing himself too hard. Whoosh! Boom! 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 The axis of the earth shook because Ananta had been thrown. But that was all. Hercules couldn't handle all of Ananta's heads by himself. Kya! One of the heads opened its mouth towards Hercules. A thunderous breath escapes. Like that, Zeus, who had been watching the battle between Heracles and Ananta, muttered regretfully. Perhaps I should have caught it somehow back then. When it was first released from its seal, Ananta was not such a formidable opponent. Even without gathering this many troops, Zeus and Heracles would have been able to defeat it together. Perhaps because he knew that, Ananta chose to escape somehow. Was it an unforeseen circumstance? Hades asked just in case, but he didn't think so. He was Zeus, a perfectionist who was more meticulous and cautious than anyone else. There was no way such a guy would recklessly go out to catch Ananta. As expected, I expected it, but I don't like it when I actually see it. Fortunately, it seemed to still be within the realm of his expectations. He looked up at the dark clouds above. Fortunately, it seems to come quickly when it's like this. As soon as he finished speaking. Get bigger. Boom. The Ruyi Jingu bang fell like rain through the dark clouds. Ruyi. Penetrating light. Kya. Ananta's dragons roared. Ananta's body was crushed by 100 Ruyi Jingu bangs. Heracles, who had been struggling to fight Ananta, looked up at the sky from where the Ruyi Jingu bangs had flown in. This is. His lips curled up into a slight smile. With the arrival of such a reliable ally, Heracles cheered. Why did you come only now, monkey? Who's a monkey? His voice was loud enough to make his ears ring. Kwang. At the same time, the Ruyi Jingu bang fell next to Heracles. It seemed that he was rather offended by being called a monkey. Do you have a problem with that? I said it because I'm glad. Heracles said as he staggered. He relaxed because he thought help had arrived. Sun Wukong's eyes, which had activated the fire eyes of truth, saw Heracles' condition. Sweat poured from his body without stopping. The power of the giant and the lightning that had possessed his body had scattered. Sun Wukong clicked his tongue and asked. Why did you foolishly try to do this alone? Foolish. Riding the Ruyi Jingu bang, the clones burst one after another into the electric current that flowed in. Stunned expression of Hercules. To think that he would hear the story that he was foolish from none other than Sun Ogong. He had never thought that such a day would come. It couldn't be helped. If not for that bastard's bead, the morale of our army wouldn't have been dampened. What's so important about those who are scared of mere beads? Right now is the time when we need more firepower. With me here, what is there to be lacking in firepower? Sun Ogong shrugged his shoulders with a confident expression. Certainly, the firepower of the Ruyi Jingu bang he poured out, capable of creating clones, could not be ignored. However, seeing Sun Ogong shrugging his shoulders despite being late, there was no way nice words would come out. To be late and only have a mouth that works. Human devil, I found it before you guys. Then why did you come now? You guys were just closer. Lucky you. If you're late, shut up. You're the one who should be doing that, being on the verge of dying and all. Swish. Sun Ogong turned his body and looked at Ananta, who was fighting the clones. Rest there. Don't be surprised watching this hung fight. Pak. Having said that, Sun Ogong flew straight toward Ananta. Sun Ogong moving while riding the somersault cloud. Thanks to that, Hercules, who had some time to rest, sat down and caught his breath. Phew. Despite fighting here and there, Sun Ogong was one of the few powerful people Hercules could trust. Although he was pushed by Ananta last time, now he had Zeus' support as well. Then he would be able to endure enough. All he had to do now was recover his stamina as soon as possible and join the front lines. And then, woo, above the dark clouds that Zeus had spread. A familiar flow of magic power was felt. Administrator. The control of magic power that the administrators handled. That power was covering Ananta's surroundings. However, no, that bastard, the one who was actually handling that power was not an administrator. A beautiful woman showing off her beauty even from far away in the clouds. 10 years ago, he remembered seeing her fighting from afar. Tsukuyomi. Thwack. The Ruyi Jingu bangs shot out by Sun Ogong's clones crushed Ananta's body. Kya. Ananta's dragons spewed electric currents. As the lightning flowed through the Ruyi Jingu bang, the doppelgangers exploded one by one. However, they were still just doppelgangers. Ananta's eyes darted around, searching for Sun Wukong's real body. Looking for me, Sun Wukong smirked and landed on Ananta's head. He curled his fist with his elongated fingernails and struck Ananta's head. Bang! With a sound like stone shattering, Sun Wukong moved on to the next head. Open hollow corner bracket. Is it you again? Sun Wukong, a high ranker known as the Great Sage, heaven's equal. To Ananta, who had countless heads, he was a more troublesome opponent than even Hercules. Doppelganger technique. That skill, which had achieved the highest rank, wielded the power to rival an entire guild on its own. The only weakness of the doppelganger technique was to find and subdue the main body. And foolishly enough, even with such a doppelganger technique, Sun Wukong had chosen to fight head-on. Yes, it's me again. Clack. Sun Wukong pointed the Ruyi Jingu bang at Ananta's torso. His eyes were already gleaming gold. Elongate, Ruyi. Twang. Sun Wukong swung the Ruyi Jingu bang and quickly flew up onto Ananta's body. You escaped quite easily last time, didn't you? Rip. Sun Wukong pulled out more of his hair. Doppelgangers manifested through his hair. For Ananta, who had just gotten rid of his doppelgangers, it felt like cockroaches were multiplying before his eyes. Open hollow corner bracket stop pestering me. As he was about to unleash his lightning in annoyance. Crackle, crackle, for some reason, the lightning was suppressed and did not explode. Open hollow corner bracket this is close hollow corner bracket. He had felt a similar sensation a lot recently. Administrators. The strange abilities they wielded overlapped with the phenomenon that was happening now. Could it be that the administrators had joined hands with the players? As Ananta thought that, he soon recalled a player who had shown the same ability as this. Open hollow corner bracket that's right. There was one more. It was not difficult to locate the culprit. Ananta had countless eyes, and there were no blind spots for those eyes. On the heads that were facing the sky, Tsukuyomi, who had revealed herself as the dark clouds in the sky cleared, was looking down at Ananta. Open hollow corner bracket Lord Izanagi. Chapter 594. Izanagi suppresses the magic power of Monster King Ananta. Izanagi suppresses the actions of Monster King Ananta. Monster King Ananta resists Izanagi. My eyes hurt, my vision blurred, the pain in my eyes gradually spread, turning into a headache. But, was there such a monster? I couldn't help it now. Monster King Ananta. In order to catch that guy, I needed Izanagi's power. I still can't use this properly. How would it feel if I could handle Izanagi without any problems? Magic power, the power that forms the foundation of this world. If I could freely control that power, and handle it infinitely. I wondered if I could become invincible. As expected. Crackle, crackle, Ananta's lightning, which had been spreading rapidly, gradually subsided. And Tsukuyomi's eyes sparkled as she confirmed its appearance. It's working. There was an overwhelming difference in power between Tsukuyomi and Ananta. Ananta was a difficult opponent even if Zeus, ranked first, and Heracles, ranked second, fought together. The fact that Tsukuyomi was able to block such an opponent's technique was due to the power of Izanagi in her eyes. But then, swish, Ananta's eyes turned towards Tsukuyomi. Open hollow corner bracket Lord Izanagi. Quote. Tsukuyomi's expression hardened at the voice coming from Ananta's mouth. He knew Izanagi's name. It was strange. Was there someone else who knew this name besides us? The sword of Kusanagi, the mirror of Yata, the 8 Shaku Kyokugyoku. Only the three-legged crow, including Tsukuyomi, knew about Izanagi, who was created by bringing these items together. Izanagi, known as the creator of magic power. It was said that those who gathered all 3 divine artifacts could obtain his power. While Tsukuyomi was surprised, crunch, crunch, one of Ananta's heads prepared its breath. Boom, the breath enveloped Tsukuyomi's body. Tsukuyomi reached forward and pushed the breath away. Crackle, crackle, crackle. Izanagi's breath collided with Ananta's breath. The breath that disappeared from Tsukuyomi's fingertips was transferred to her eyes as a burden. Throb, the pain in her eyes increased. In an instant, her vision turned white, and she felt dizzy. Tsukuyomi, who barely regained her senses, glared at Ananta and asked. How do you know this? Open hollow corner bracket I couldn't not know. I've met him before. You've met him, Izanagi. Tsukuyomi's eyes widened. How old was this monster in front of her? Izanagi. He was an ancient ranker who was older than Uranus or Nithara. Even the ancient rankers who were older than Uranos and Eora had a hard time finding clear clues about him despite looking for records about Izanagi for a long time. It was impossible not to be surprised that the monster in front of them had met such an Izanagi. Even more so, you better be careful, Izanagi also died relying on his eyes, just like you. The words that flowed out of Ananta's mouth shook Tsukuyomi's mind, who was already feeling burdened because of Izanagi. Relied on his eyes. Suddenly, a sharp pain, a voice of bewilderment flowed out of her mouth. What? Chuck, Son Goku pointed the Rui Jingu Bang towards Ananta. Ananta's lightning, which had suddenly stopped. Immediately, Son Goku recalled the words Tsukuyomi had said. I'll seal that guy's power. How are you going to do that? There's always a way, Tsukuyomi had said meaningfully, pointing to her eyes. Even at that time, Son Goku had not believed her words. No matter how great an item he had in his hands, the Ananta he had seen was not someone who would lose to the likes of Tsukuyomi. But she had really done it. Looks like his magic power has been sealed. She had sealed Ananta's magic power. Of course, too bad. It wasn't Son Goku who welcomed it, though. Thwack. The extended Rui Jingu Bang pressed down on Ananta's torso. Brandishing the giant Rui Jingu Bang, Son Goku set the Wananjiamjung on fire. Just because I don't have lightning, do you think I'd lose to a monkey like you? Grr! Numerous dragons bared their teeth. The dragons opened their mouths towards Son Goku's clones and roared. Let's see about that. Chomp! The clone's body was bitten by the dragon's head. The clone that was crushed by the teeth disappeared, and another clone and head collided. However, the clone was different from the main body. Son Goku, who was holding the Rui Jingu Bang, managed to reach the torso after hitting a few heads. Hup! He held the Rui Jingu Bang in reverse and raised it above Ananta's body. Magic power flowed into the Rui Jingu Bang through his palm. Get bigger, Rui! Creak! The Rui Jingu Bang soared high into the sky, piercing through the clouds. Ananta's body sank down. The battlefield, which had been consumed by fear, was reversed by Son Goku's appearance. What are you all doing? Kaboom! Thor jumped up with his hammer. Don't miss this chance. Under his command, the Valkyries and Rankers under Asgard, and the Rankers of Olympus, began to use their skills. Thousands of skills pierced Ananta's body, and spears and swords scratched his leather. Clang! Ananta's teeth bit Son Goku's shoulder. Screech! His clothes were torn and his shoulder was bitten, but... Poahihiheet! Sun Ogong just burst out laughing strangely and looked at Hercules. Hey, you were losing to this kid. The shoulder that had been bitten by teeth was perfectly fine. Ananta's teeth had not been able to pierce Sun Ogong's skin. It was possible because Sun Ogong had superior natural abilities. However, if we were to look simply at strength and physical toughness, Hercules was superior to Sun Ogong. That monkey, Hercules' Fraunkries Datsun Ogonji's teasing. That wasfan Hawasabuto say that you, yourself, had been thoroughly beaten by this guy before. So nothing is wrong. Had known for Samaris and Thathagaia's magical powers had been locked away. However, even if that were true, it was strange for it to be this much more convenient. Rather, the uneasiness intensified as situations became more convenient. Quack! Was that why? Hercules Shayez Latupashi applied more strength to his hand. It is gradually recovering. Phew! He let out a long breath to increase the tension. It left bad taste in his mouth to leave everything to Sun Ogong. Let's go, Hercules. He moved his body to join Sun Ogong. Blurry. Vision gradually blurred. Tsukuyomi, standing on the clouds, seemed like he midway to collapse any minute. Azanagi, he shared your fate of dying by or lying on your eyes. Ananta's words continued to whirl around her head. Azanagi. A great being who created the Trinity. The god of the three-legged crow died because he could not overcome his own power. Will I soon end up like that? Strangely, the thought would not leave her mind. And when her mind cleared, she was not in the heavens. In pitch-black darkness. Tsukuyomi had regained consciousness. Thesis. Vision was completely black. A world devoid of light. Within that, there was only one thing Tsukuyomi could see. You've come. A middle-aged man with bandages wrapped around his head and face. His features were difficult to discern because of the white bandages. Buther K knew who he was as they met. Azanagi. Yes. Eye to eye. Clack. He approached, stepping on the black floor. Azanagi. His voice was calm. Thy speaking out from the bandages glistened. Hedafinitely had the same eyes as Tsukuyomi. You are my child. Were the other two? The other two. The moment they said that, Tsukuyomi feel like it shed tear sanaminute. A mater a swan Susano. That with them, who had been with her all her life, were no there any more. That with them irradiating. The sadness you felt was because of that. Tug. Azanagi shan touch at Tsukuyomi eyes shudder. Didn't grieve too heavily. Itis note your foe. Yes, I will help you meet that with them. Tsukuyomi looked up with surprised eyes. That with them, Amaterasu, Susano, are you serious? Yes, just trust me. Snap. At that moment, a yellow dragon's head appeared behind Tsukuyomi. It had pure white teeth that stood out in the darkness. As if it would bite Tsukuyomi's body at any moment. However, she still hadn't noticed its presence. Glance. Azanagi's gaze turned to the dragon behind Tsukuyomi for a moment before returning. I will definitely make it possible for you to meet those two again. Thank you, thank you. Tsukuyomi bowed her head. The tears she had been holding back finally pierced her heart and flowed out. Even when Susano died, and even when Amaterasu died, she had not shed tears like this. But the thought of seeing them again was too much for her to bear. In that moment, why do all the old rankers think the same way? A voice came that interrupted the emotions of joy and sorrow. Thud, Uranus and Yorei were the same as you. Tsukuyomi turned her head in surprise. Drip, drip. Yuan, with blood on his hands. Next to him was the head of Ananta, the dragon that had been crushed in Yuan's hands and was bleeding. Kim Yu-hoon, what is this? She still knew Yuan by the name, Kim Yu-hoon. The ranker who had defeated the administrators in the Heavenly War. Don't be fooled, that guy doesn't have the ability to let you meet the dead again. Thud, Yuan kicked the head of Ananta, which he had crushed with his fist. These guys are close. Swoosh, Yuan's and Izanagi's eyes met. Izanagi's eyes, which were exposed outside the bandage, were filled with displeasure, as if he had been interrupted. Who are you? You wouldn't know even if I explained it, so don't worry about it. How rude. Slash. That moment, a red line appeared on Izanagi's neck with a soft sound. It happened in an instant. Even though his neck was cut, Izanagi stubbornly turned his head to check the face of the person who had cut him from behind. You are. Creak. Izanagi's head and body separated and fell to the ground. My son. He continued to speak even as he fell to the ground. He's pretty tough. Yuan clicked his tongue as he watched Izanagi. Meanwhile, son, I've never seen that guy before. Tsukuyomi's expression wavered at the face that appeared behind Izanagi's severed neck. You, a man with a sword and an expressionless face. The man greeted Tsukuyomi. Hello, the ranker known as the storm god from thousands of years ago. A member of the three nobles like Tsukuyomi and Amaterasu. Susanoo. He waved awkwardly at Tsukuyomi. Chapter 595. Kwang. The black space disappeared. Tsukuyomi sat down and cried. Thanks to that, Izanagi's power disappeared, but she was able to live anyway. Was she trying to use Izanagi from the beginning? No, maybe the other way around. Ananta and Izanagi, it was unknown who was trying to use whom. However, one thing was certain, the two, who only had half of their power left, joined forces to try to bring down Tsukuyomi. Fortunately, I arrived just in time. By now, Tsukuyomi would have collapsed like she was half dead. Susanoo. What is it, master? Stop shaking. Do it later if you're going to do it. Are you telling her to hear this? At Susanoo's words, Tsukuyomi suddenly came to her senses. She realized that Susanoo was not the only one here. Tsukuyomi wiped away her tears. Her gaze turned to Yuan. He called him master. Susanoo was probably number one in terms of pride. The fact that he acknowledged someone else and called him master was beyond her comprehension. It was surprising enough that he appeared with Susanoo, but their relationship was even more unbelievable. Tsukuyomi. Yes, she answered Yuan's sudden call with a bewildered voice. I'll give you time to recover later, so for now, recover for a bit. How long will it take you to use Izanagi again? Well, I don't know. Just give me a rough estimate. It doesn't have to be long. Just a little while. If it's just a little while. Tsukuyomi pondered for a moment before spreading one hand open. About 5 minutes. I think that should be enough. 5 minutes. Yuan nodded as he quickly pictured the situation in his head. Below, Ananta was fighting Son Goku and Heracles. The situation had become tense again as Ananta started to rampage after his magic seal was released. Then I'll take care of the 5 minutes. And Pandora. Yuan looked back at Pandora, who was sticking close behind him. Stay here and watch Tsukuyomi. Me, yeah, that guy might try to pull some tricks again. Tsukuyomi, who was using Izanagi, was defenseless against outside attacks. Her neck had been cut, but Izanagi hadn't really disappeared. Izanagi was already dead, so it was impossible for him to die again. In order to prevent that, one of his allies needed to stay close. Can you do it? Yes. Only when Pandora nodded was Yuan able to relax. If he was fighting directly, that would be one thing, but Pandora would be enough to block him if he was just making a fuss from afar. Yuan, Pandora asked while looking at the sweat on Yuan's forehead. Are you okay? As the situation was urgent, Yuan directly poured his magic power into the sun's chariot to move it. He poured out as much magic power as he could to increase his speed and continued to rise. Thanks to that, he was able to make it in time, but the sun's chariot was in tatters. Furthermore, Yuan had also used up a lot of his magic power. Don't worry, Yuan calmed Pandora's anxiety as he stroked her head. This time will be different from last time. Golden eyes sparkled. Ever since he came here, Yuan had been using prophetic vision. Monster King Ananta. It was strange to say it was thanks to him, but thanks to missing him, Yuan was able to regain his senses. Whoosh! Yuan threw his body under the clouds. Susanoo chased after him. Kya! The sound of a huge dragon's cry shook their ears, and Yuan's eyes shone. I won't miss this time. Kwao! Ananta's head shot out lightning once more. The rankers from Olympus and Asgard were swept away by it, and Hades released his magic power to block the breath. This lizard, crack, bang, the dragon's jaw that Sun Wukong had punched with his fist shattered. However, Ananta, who could now use magic power, wasn't as soft as before. Open hollow corner bracket, do you remember? Growl. Two heads opened their mouths with Sun Wukong in between them. Screech. Open hollow corner bracket, I think I hit you like this back then. Quowing. Thunder struck from the left and right and struck Sun Wukong. Yellow lightning gathered in a circle and trapped Sun Wukong. Crackle, crackle, crackle. Ah, ah. A scream came out of Sun Wukong's mouth as his whole body was burned black by the electricity. Open hollow corner bracket, I heard you were a fool, but I guess you're no different. You just run in without thinking. There was laughter in Ananta's voice. Crack. Open hollow corner bracket, well then, I'll have a good meal. Cough, huff huff. Then, Sun Wukong burst out laughing. Ananta paused briefly at the laughter that did not fit the situation. I'm a bit late, but I came just in time. Qua-at. A black line was drawn on the dragon's body. The power of corrosion spread from the tip of the sword that had cut through the hard scales. Did you run here? I flew here. For a moment, Yuan and Sun Wukong's eyes met. Pot. The body that had been bound by Ananta was released. Sun Wukong, who had jumped onto the somersault cloud as he fell to the ground, flew high into the sky. Choo-choo-choo-choo. A black light flowed out of the cold ring in Yuan's hand. The King of the Dead borrows the power of the dead. The power of Tartarus is imbued in the abyssal sword. Quat. The sharp, crooked blade cut through the dragon's scales like a drill. Yuan ran over Ananta's body and slashed his body with his sword like a madman. Choo-choo, choo-choo. The torn scales did not regenerate easily. A wound imbued with the power of Tartarus. Ananta glared at Yuan, who was tearing his body apart. Open hollow corner bracket, you've come again, haven't you? It was Yuan who had stopped Ananta, who had already escaped once. Just as Yuan was sharpening his sword inwardly at the thought that he had let Ananta go because of his complacency, Ananta was also sharpening his teeth at Yuan. Open hollow corner bracket, you are strange. Where did you fall from? Or did you rise? Neither I nor Gandharva, nor anyone else remembers you. Close hollow corner bracket. A rancor no one remembers. A dangerous being who cut off half of himself. Open hollow corner bracket, you smell more dangerous than anyone else here. That's why Ananta swallowed his saliva. Open hollow corner bracket, that's why I can't stand it. It's delicious. Kya. Dozens of heads turned their heads towards Yuan at once. A strong electric shock gathered in his mouth. Heracles turned his head in surprise at the sudden surge of magic power. Yuan. He was a fool, but Sun Wukong was immortal. A guy who believed that even if there was a chance, he would never die. But Yuan was different. That guy is great, but his opponent is Ananta. He even blocked my father's astrape. Quote. Quaduk. Breaking the dragon's neck between his arms, Heracles headed towards Yuan. I have to stop that. But at that moment, crackle, crackle, crackle. Lightning bolts shot up into the sky, starting from Yuan's fingers. The power of lightning is imbued in the heart of Oranos. His magic power radiated through the heart of Oranos. It was no smaller than Ananta's lightning, although my skill in wielding lightning might be far inferior to Zeus's. Crackle, rumble, a giant lightning spear shot up into the sky. I have the main body of Olympus in my hand. Yuan suddenly became curious. Ananta, the king of monsters that wielded lightning. He wondered who wielded higher level lightning between him and Oranos. Let's test it out. He poured his magic power into the heart of Oranos. Then, the lightning Yuan was holding in his hand spread out to counter Ananta's lightning. My lightning. Ananta's body staggered greatly as if he was taken aback by the same attribute magic power pouring out of Yuan's hand. And then, rumble, a giant with red flames appeared. Qian Marayong has mastered the fire of the giant. Rower, the giant, who had grown in size by absorbing magic power, gradually became similar in size to Ananta. And with the appearance of such a Qian Marayong, the battlefield fell into chaos once again. Gee, giant. What is that? Another monster. Giants. They were a race with great significance to Asgard. The giants, who existed in the land of fire, Muspelheim, had been enemies with Asgard for a long time. And among them, there was only one being that burned with such flames and was of such size. Surtur. Thor's eyes widened the most. Surtur. He was the enemy of his father, Odin. He was the largest and hottest among the giants. But the giant that had just appeared. He felt very similar to Surtur. Rumble. A sword engulfed in flames. The moment the sword swung towards Ananta. Kya. Clang. The teeth of the dragons bit into Qian Marayong's sword. Slash, slash. The heads of the dragons wrapped around Cheon Marayong's body. Yuan's Cheon Marayong and Ananta clashed. Screech. Crackle, crackle, fire and electricity, the destructive magical powers of the two attributes were mixed together. Sweat beaded on Yuan's forehead as he moved the Cheon Marayong and swung the tip of the sword. And there was another person watching Yuan from afar. That guy. It was the first time in 10 years that Son Goku had seen Yuan use his power like this. Why is he so venomous? Since it wasn't related to the outer, Son Goku thought Yuan wouldn't care much. Even if he helped, he didn't know he would be this active. The outer may have been the ones who destroyed Yuan's world. However, Ananta had nothing to do with it. Warwork. Flames rose into the sky as Cheon Marayong cut off Ananta's neck. Meanwhile, the body of Cheon Marayong was covered with wounds from Ananta's heads biting it. It doesn't matter how many heads I cut off. Kya. Ananta's cry swallowed the battlefield. His eyes scanned the battlefield, glancing at rankers such as Hades, Thor, and Zeus. There is so much to eat here. This is my first time seeing such a feast. He grew weaker each time one of his heads was cut off. But if he ate everyone here, he might be able to grow big enough to swallow the tower. Feast. The corner of Yuan's mouth went up. That's something we should be talking about. Jabug. Inside Cheon Marayong, engulfed in flames. Yuan lowered his sword and stepped out. Ananta was annoyed. His words from earlier, his leisurely gait, what do you mean? Isn't that right, you monsters, Yorurung. Now over 100 were crushed or cut off, and the remaining heads looked down at Yuan in unison. Since long ago, you've been our experience points. With those words, Juk, the black wounds remaining on Ananta's body opened up. Tartarus absorbs, Monster King Ananta. Jiwi. The open wounds swallowed Ananta's body. The unexpected Ananta was rarely embarrassed. What the, is it because you're so big? Keying. Golden eyes. Yuan muttered, his foresight shining. It takes a while to activate. Chapter 596. Tartaros absorbs the Monster King Ananta. The Monster King Ananta resists Tartaros's call. Kya, the terrible roar of the dragon shook the earth. Even if one covered their ears to avoid hearing it, the roar pierced their hands and ears and made their heads spin. Kya. In the end, some rankers couldn't hold on and collapsed. Yuan, who was standing nearby, felt a sudden chill. Ananta, the density of the magic power he felt from him was not much different from Outer's. Shub Niggurath, I feel like I'm facing him. One of the most powerful beings in Outer. The foolish chaos, the master of the black forest that even Nyarlathotep feared, came to mind. Open hollow corner bracket. What are you? At Ananta's roar, the clouds and the sky tore apart. Chi-Ik, Tartaros, which had devoured Yuan's magic power, grew in size. Like a black hole, it pulled Ananta in more and more. Open hollow corner bracket. There's no way you suddenly fell from the sky like this. Did you come from outside this world too? Ananta was losing his composure. It meant that the energy emanating from Tartaros was that ominous. Once he was caught, it would probably not be easy to escape from Tartaros. Furthermore, if it was just Yuan alone, that would be one thing, but there were many other enemies around him now. Thud, planting his 2 feet firmly on the ground, Heracles began to push Ananta into Tartaros. Let's help him. Damn it, am I just a supporting role? Following Heracles, who had volunteered to help, Sun Wukong also grumbled and aimed his Ruyi Jingu Bang. Grow, Ruyi, Quakwang, the Ruyi Jingu Bangs, created using his hair, pushed against Ananta's body. Heracles and Sun Wukong, the two of them, known for their strength, began to push Ananta simultaneously. In addition to that, Izanagi's power seals the Monster King Ananta's magic power. Magic power is temporarily restricted. The fiercely burning electricity stopped. Ananta's heads looked up at the sky and glared at Tsukuyomi, who was above the clouds. Open hollow corner bracket. Izanagi. Tsukuyomi with Izanagi's eyes. Her role was to seal Ananta's power. Ananta, whose electrical ability was sealed. In the meantime, Yuan opened the gate of Tartaros wide open. I think I can help with this too. The King of the Dead widens the gate of Tartaros. The King of the Dead calls the Monster King Ananta. Susus. As the gate of Tartaros widened, the force pulling Ananta grew stronger. Yuan looked back. We're meeting for the first time, but I don't feel like a stranger. Is it because of that power? Hades, the one who had received the title of the King of the Dead and had raised his ranking to 10th place, the high ranker of Olympus. He was the one who had helped Yuan. We'll talk about it later. If it's about greetings, we should do it. You're the one who helped us. No, Yuan's eyes shone. It's my job. Blink. Sun Wukong's ears twitched as he eavesdropped on Yuan and Hades's conversation from afar. It sounded like a determined speech. Come to think of it, Yuan was the one who had missed Ananta at the end. That punk, he's gotten quite heated. He seemed more venomous than usual. While Sun Wukong's attention was briefly diverted. Jeek. The Ruyi Jingu bangs held in the clones, hands were gradually being pushed back. The ground beneath their feet was being swept away, and the surface began to cave in. Sun Wukong's eyes flashed. No matter how strong he was someone whose magic power had been sealed. Furthermore, they were combining their strengths with Heracles and Yuan. Even if their opponent was Shub-Niggurath. Even if the opponent is Shub-Niggurath. When the goat opened its mouth like that and bit Ananta's shoulder. It was normal to be pushed back to this extent. Yes. Creak. Son Goku's lips curled up. This is more fun. That's what you think, monkey. Groan. Heracles, with veins popping out on both arms, gritted his teeth. Try using some strength. Crackle, crackle. Heracles pushed harder, emitting electricity from both hands. Sweat poured down his forehead like rain. Far from pushing him away, Ananta was resisting fiercely, waving hundreds of heads. It feels like I'm pushing a mountain with deep roots. He was confident that no one could beat him in terms of strength. However, pushing Ananta, who was determined to endure, felt overwhelming even to Heracles. What the hell have you been eating all this time? Ananta had been missing since he broke the seal. He didn't know how much he had eaten and grown in size. This is too heavy, the resistance was too strong. As he lost his margin, Ananta was now resisting with all his might. That's why Heracles instinctively felt it. If he didn't catch Ananta here and now, he might not get another chance. Thud. At that moment, Yuan, who had been pouring his magic power into Tartarus, took a step forward. Yuan. It might have been different if he had fought alone, but now it was a battle that was no different from a war. Above all, the team currently had him and Son Goku. In this situation, he was originally supposed to play the role of a rearguard and support. That's why Heracles asked in surprise. Why are you coming forward? Heracles, who was about to ask why he was coming forward, closed his mouth. Golden eyes. Yuan had been using precognition from the beginning until now. He's been watching this far. That means there must be a reason for him to come forward. Ananta took a step back. He moved away from Tartarus. Open hollow corner bracket. If I get out of here, close hollow corner bracket. Numerous eyes looked down at Yuan. With threatening bared teeth, the king of monsters spoke to Yuan. Open hollow corner bracket. I'll eat you first. Just you wait. You're making a fuss because you have a little margin. Yuan was also shocked. He didn't think he would fail to catch him even after doing this. Heracles, Son Goku, Zeus, Hades, even Thor. Judging from the fact that he couldn't be caught even with this much force, he seemed to know why he hadn't been killed in the past and had only been sealed. However, I said 5 minutes. Thud. Looking up at Ananta from up close, Yuan continued. So I can't drag this out any longer. Thump. Heracles heard a small footstep. Before him, Son Goku noticed Yuan's intentions. Come to think of it, you don't know. Son Goku grinned at Heracles. Heracles frowned at his teasing expression. What are you talking about? What that guy has with him? Flick. Son Goku's gaze turned. Around Ananta, one by one, goats began to reveal themselves through the dark forest. I guess there were still some left. Bah, they're traces. Numerous goats surrounded Ananta, from the size of a real goat or a human to the size of a house. As numerous goats revealed themselves, Ananta's eyes widened. Open hollow corner bracket. That's close hollow corner bracket. Momentarily, a scene flashed through Ananta's mind. What are you? Before coming here, there was a small goat he had briefly passed by. A one-eyed goat that cried at the sight of him. Aren't you my child? The monster, though small in size, was not his child. He thought it was strange. Obviously, all the monsters in this tower should be his children. Sure, here is the translation. When the baby goat opened its mouth and bit Ananta's shoulder, he realized the identity of the baby goat. You are the one from outside. Outside the tower, the beings with incomprehensible power that even the administrators were afraid of and hid themselves. The baby goat was a fragment that had come off of them. That's what he thought then. But, open hollow corner bracket, it was you. Clang, clang, 1,000 baby goats began to bite Ananta's body. Flesh was being torn apart and ripped off. The cries of the baby goats echoed everywhere. And at the appearance of the baby goats, the alliance of Olympus and Asgard fell into chaos as well. Heek, Are those things by any chance? The rankers here belong to Olympus and Asgard, and most of them had experienced the war with the outer gods. Some of them had even fought the baby goats in the 2 battles with Shub-Niggurath. Shub-Niggurath, the owner of the Black Forest and the being that was half of Yog-Sothoth, the leader of the outer gods. 10 years was a short time to forget her existence. That bastard, he's determined. Heracles laughed out loud at the baby goats that Yuan had summoned. He couldn't have known what kind of reaction there would be when Yuan used the name of the outer gods on this battlefield. His ability to read the flow of battle was better than anyone else's, along with Zeus. Even so, there was only one reason why he had summoned the baby goats like this. It was his will to catch Ananta no matter what. You idiot, now is the time to be impressed. At Son Goku's cry, Heracles suddenly came to his senses. At this moment when countless baby goats were attacking Ananta, he definitely had to finish off Ananta. I like big guys like you. Screech. On top of Ananta's scales, wounds were rapidly appearing along with the stormy wind. You're big, so there's a lot to peel. Storm Fortress. Clang, clang, creak, creak, countless sword strikes that cut off the hard scales one by one. Susanoo was climbing on top of Ananta's body and cutting him down. It wasn't just him. Rumble, rumble, the sound of thunder echoed from the ground. The golden lightning that was dyeing the ground turned the rankers' gazes towards it. I guess I was too big earlier. Crackle, crackle. Rumble, rumble, Astrape. It was Zeus who was preparing his final shot again. It couldn't be used often because it was so powerful. However, depending on how you used it, it had the power to turn the tide of the battle. Be careful not to get caught up in it. Unlike his kind explanation, Zeus ignored Son Goku and Heracles nearby and fired Astrape. Boom, Kwa Wung, a giant lightning spear pierced Ananta's body. Kya, Ananta's body shook greatly, the dragons screamed. Heracles and Son Goku pushed Ananta's body into Tartarus while receiving the lightning that scattered from Astrape with their bodies. Clang, clang, me. While being bitten by the baby goats, Ananta glared at Yuan. Now that he had come this far, he also knew. The victory had already been decided. Ananta, more than half of whose body had entered Tartarus, felt his strength draining away. Open hollow corner bracket I will curse you. He spat out the words using the remaining heads. He cursed Yuan. Ignoring his gaze, Yuan tapped the ring he was wearing and replied. Let's see about that, as Ananta's entire body fell into Tartarus. Slide. Tartarus welcomes, Monster King Ananta. In the middle of the battlefield, the empty space where once there was a giant dragon displayed itself. Chapter 597. Monster King Ananta has been sealed in. The monster's stats will be lowered again. Messages appeared simultaneously for the players. It signaled the end of the short war. The goats disappeared as soon as Ananta disappeared. In the middle of the finished battlefield, Thor stood there with a bewildered face. Just now, the goats that appeared and disappeared before he could fully understand the situation. The energy he felt from them was still clear as if it was yesterday, even after 10 years. Did they return? Thor was overcome with an eerie feeling. Cold sweat ran down his spine from the ominous feeling. The name Outer was still a fear to Thor, who had become the current king of Asgard. If so, this was not a matter of simply releasing the Monster King from the seal. A war so great that it would overturn the history of the tower. There was a possibility that the war would be repeated. Clack. Don't worry too much, Zeus, with a tired face, said, touching Thor's shoulder. What you are worried about will not happen, Lord Zeus. Zeus, who had approached right next to him without him knowing. He had used Astrape twice in a short period of time, and he had a rare tired face. But why, even though the young of Shub-Niggurath, a being more dangerous than Ananta, had appeared, he did not look flustered at all. Do you know something? I do know. How on earth? Don't try to find out now. Even if you try to find out, you won't be able to know. Yes, Thor looked puzzled as if asking what that meant. He must have seen Yuan fighting Ananta just now, but he did not suspect him. There was only one thing that came to his mind. The goats of the Black Forest. The only information that they were remnants of Outer. If he remembers him, he wouldn't be reacting like this. This was a common reaction from those who had forgotten Yuan. They did not try to remember Yuan. Even if they were close to a situation where they could remember, something would interfere and redirect them so that they would not think of him. It was the same this time. Even though he had just fought with Yuan, Thor did not doubt that he would have the power of the Outer. Especially this guy, he doesn't have many connections with Kim Yuan. It might have been different if he had seen him face to face like Baruna and experienced his power. He didn't think he would remember Yu-won just by hearing about him through himself. Above all, Yu-won left the scene immediately after the fight was over. Even the stone monkey can tell. That guy doesn't want to reveal himself yet. Even Yu-won started his new activities under the name Kim Yu-hoon, not his own name. It was an act of concern that the administrators might remember if he revealed his name. That guy is hidden. Depending on when and how he moves, he can upset the balance of the tower. Hidden, a key that can change the outcome of the war. Zeus valued such variables in all games. All that is known as the sheep of Shub-Niggurath. That's the ideal point. There was no need for Yu-won to be known anymore. At least not until you have a sure chance of winning. Oh, hey, Yu-won, where did you go? Kim Yu-UHP. He-yu-hu at, email protected. Watch your mouth, monkey. Son Goku, who was eagerly searching for Yu-won in the distance, and Hercules, who shut Son Goku's mouth. Zeus sighed, putting his hand to his forehead at Son Goku's reaction. That stupid monkey, I thought even a fool like Son Goku would know. I guess I overestimated him. Right after the fight with Ananta, Tsukuyomi, who was using Izanagi, lost consciousness. A deep sleep like a bottomless pit. In the ears of the mind that had fallen so deeply, a voice was heard. Which side are you on? It was a familiar voice. Where did I hear it? Thoughts floated in the air. I felt like I had heard that voice somewhere. What are you talking about? Amaterasu, or Susanoo, I thought I could remember. She was most surprised by the question since she heard the news of Susanoo's death. If those two are enemies, which side will you take? Under the name of Sambhujaja, they were like friends or family. The three were intertwined with inseparable emotions. There was nothing more difficult for her than a question asking her to choose one of the two. However, she knew the intention behind the question. Did he really kill Susanoo? In fact, Tsukuyomi also knew that something was involved in Susanoo's death, and that another one of her brothers was involved in that. That way, the man who asked the question drove a wedge into the doubt that she had for a long time. You mean intentionally, for Susanoo to die? No. That can't be true. That was something that she was denying in her heart. For more than 100 years, Tsukuyomi followed Amaterasu, and followed again. In order to confirm that he intended and planned Susanoo's death. No, to confirm that he didn't plan it. That can't be true. Tell me, what do you believe in to be so sure? That Amaterasu was the one who killed him. So she asked, how can you be so sure about that? What the heck are you, to doubt your own friend? It was funny even to herself. She had doubted Amaterasu for more than 100 years, but she didn't feel good when someone else doubted him. She was angry at him, who doubted her friend. Who is it? A memory from a long time ago. There was a name that clearly existed somewhere on the other side of her memory, but it wouldn't come out. And this was a conversation with him. I heard it from the person himself. Little by little, she remembered little by little. How she became certain of Amaterasu's betrayal. What happened to that certainty, and who helped her. You should also have a conversation with that person. Swoosh, the shadow fluttered, her old friend appeared in front of her again. Right, that's what happened. Why hadn't she thought about it even once? How she came to know about Amaterasu's betrayal, and how she was able to defeat him. That one thing that she wouldn't be able to forget even after thousands or tens of thousands of years. She had forgotten it all. Not only that, I heard there's an incredible guy down there. Who? Filled square filled square filled square. I guess he's already broken all the records up to the 20th floor. Her memories of him came back one by one. Once a memory was pulled out, they were all intricately connected, so they came up one after another. I heard that a sub-leader was born in the heavenly demon cult. They said the minor leader of the heavenly horse religion was born. Yeah, heaven is in a mess. The great saint of the beginning heaven, the great saint of the middle heaven, and filled square filled square filled square were together. His actions were always noisy. The world changed with every step he took. Amaterasu's death and the disbandment of the three-eyed demons were just minor incidents in his path. It seems like Muspelheim has been destroyed this time. They said Surtur is dead. They said a huge monster appeared. His name is Shub. What was it? What is this guy? Why is his rank increasing so fast? Isn't this an error? You still don't know. Before he knew it, he became someone everyone in the tower knew. He's fighting on the front lines with those guys called the Outers. Kim Yu-won, in the pitch-black abyss. Tsukuyomi opened his eyes and looked shocked. He remembered his name. After the battle with Ananta, Yu-won secured a room with Pandora on that floor. It was a fairly large room with about 3 rooms. Olympus and Asgard thought the battle was over, but it wasn't. Yu-Won repeated quite a few tough battles for several more hours after that. Monster King Ananta is resisting, Tartarus. Heart of Uranus's is suppressing, Monster King Ananta. Ananta continued to resist even after entering Tartarus. Whether because Izanagi's power had disappeared, the resistance was quite violent. Furthermore, the resistance was intermittent. Throb. The hand that wore the ring throbbed. Seeing this, Pandora, who was sitting across from him, grabbed Yu-Won's hand. It's okay. Yu-Won leaned back in his chair as he wiped away the sweat dripping down his forehead with his other hand. It's done now. He succeeded in locking Ananta in Tartarus. Once suppressed by Tartarus, he was as good as dead. Phew, he exhaled slowly, relaxing his tense body. Next to him, Pandora continued to wipe away Yu-Won's sweat. Tring, tring, tring. Just then, messages arrived on the kit one after another. Yu-Won, who had caught his breath a little, checked the messages. Sun Ogong, hey, where are you? Hercules, it's chaos here right now. Are you okay? Zeus, it'll take some time to clean up the mess. Hide for a few days. The only person Yu-Won contacted with a purpose was Zeus. Yu-Won called Hercules, they'll probably be together anyway. What is it? Are you okay? Hercules' voice was heard from the other end. Hey, where are you? As expected, Son Goku's noisy voice followed. He must have thought it was strange that he suddenly disappeared. I got a room in a nearby town. Are you okay? Do you mean my body? I'm not worried about you. Rather, I was wondering if it was okay to show the Black Forest goats to so many people. Still, Hercules was more thoughtful than Son Goku. He didn't just ask where he was, but asked about the Black Forest goats he had revealed. It's okay, no one would know that I used it anyway. Even so, if by any chance the administrator finds out about the existence of the name. That's what I told you to do. Do you mean? A question arose at the end of the echoing voice. It seemed that an explanation was needed. To catch Ananta, it's a shortcut to use a name. Besides, if the administrators get scared and try to save their lives, we welcome it. What the administrators feared most was the existence of the outer gods. Nyarlathotep, Shub-Niggurath, Yog-Sothoth. In addition, there were beings who possessed incomprehensible and extraordinary powers. Yu-Won showed them the power they had in this battle for a moment. It's buying time. We need time. They've been preparing for a long time, but we're not. Time. It was the resource that all players in the tower, and Yu-Won, needed the most. Time to defend against the administrator's attack. And time to find the maple leaves, everyone needed it. Oh, if that's the case, fortunately hey. So where are you now? Son Goku, who suddenly intervened. He didn't seem to care why Yu-Won had summoned the goats. Where is this? Creak. Then, the door to the room where Tsukuyomi was sleeping opened. Yu-Won's gaze, who was continuing to speak, turned to Tsukuyomi. She looked at Yu-Won with different eyes than before. And soon, Kim Yu-Won, a different name came out of her mouth than before. I remember it all. Chapter 598. I remembered everything. Quote quote, quote quote. Silence flowed in the room. Yu-Won and Pandora shut their mouths as they looked at Tsukuyomi. Judging from her expression, it seemed like she really did. Hey, things got interesting. A giggling laughter flowed out of the key. It was Sun Ogong. No, Heracles was laughing as well. Disconnect for now. Hey, tell me where you are. Click. After disconnecting the call, Yu-Won put the key in his inventory. Tsukuyomi had sat down across from Yu-Won. Pandora's eyes glared at her. There was something about her face that rubbed her the wrong way. What did you remember? Who you are? I said it earlier, didn't I? Kim Yu-Won. Seeing her mention the name again, it seemed real. Well, he had crossed paths with her a little too often. Plus, meeting Susanoo this time was something that would have been quite the shock. It was about time she remembered. It wasn't a very welcoming situation for Yu-Won, who wanted to hide from the eyes of the admins for the time being if possible. She's not the type to go blabbing her mouth off. Even if she did, it wouldn't be a big deal. There was no need to think negatively about it. It might actually be better this way to get the cooperation of Tsukuyomi, who had Izanagi. Whoever I am, it's probably not that important. Don't try to avoid it. As if to say that was ridiculous, Tsukuyomi shook her head. What kind of person are you that everyone has forgotten you? And it's not like we just forgot, we can't even remember you when we see your face. Now that she remembered, it was unbelievable. No one else but Kim Yu-Won. I do, too. Amaterasu died by your hands. But how could I have forgotten you? It wasn't a natural phenomenon. Something had intervened, that much was certain. And Tsukuyomi thought that it must have been Yuan's doing. But, that's right, everyone forgot. What? Tsukuyomi let out a bitter laugh as if she found it absurd. Yuan brazenly continued speaking to her. I was upset, because no one remembered me. Even that idiot Sun Ogong remembers me. As he said that, he glanced at Tsukuyomi. It was as if he was asking her why she couldn't remember him when Sun Ogong did. You. Tsukuyomi's expression turned red as she realized the hidden meaning in Yuan's words. I don't know about anything else, but being compared to Sun Ogong. That was truly an insulting remark to anyone who knew the foolish side of the great sage, heaven's equal. Yuan, who turned the conversation around by teasing Tsukuyomi like that, glanced at Pandora. Pandora nodded her head with satisfaction as she watched the angry Tsukuyomi. There was no other reason why she didn't bother to explain. It's a pain to explain. It's not like anything will change even if I do. It was too difficult to make her understand why she had been forgotten. If possible, it was best to let it go like Baruna. Most of all, what was important to her was not, why. Swish. At that moment, Susanoo appeared behind Yuan. Tsukuyomi, who was about to ask Yuan for more reasons, stopped. You call me often, I just fell asleep. Go back to sleep if you don't like it. No, I'm welcome, Susanoo answered hurriedly. Tsukuyomi, who saw this for the first time, stared at Susanoo with unfamiliar eyes for a moment before nodding her head. Well, if the other party was Yuan, it was understandable that Susanoo would acknowledge him. No matter how great the three-eyed evil was, it was nothing compared to what Yuan had accomplished. Susanoo hesitated for a moment. I finally made it. Made it. The Samson GI, the treasure that the three-eyed evil had been searching for. It was referring to Izanagi, the item that combined them. Thanks to you guys. With those words, Tsukuyomi's gaze swept over Susanoo and Yuan once each. Susanoo, who caught the Orochi and discovered the Kusanagi. Yuan, who found the Yata mirror. And Amaterasu, who had the Yasukani no Magatama. In fact, Tsukuyomi hadn't collected any of the Samson GI. But, you did well anyway. Tsukuyomi's lips curled up slightly at those words. Susanoo died first, and after Amaterasu died, she thought that no one would know what she had accomplished. But still, one person. Not alive, but one person knew what she had accomplished. He has this side to him too. Yuan looked at Susanoo, who couldn't meet Tsukuyomi's eyes properly. He was called a murderer. Susanoo, who treated human lives like flies, had played the greatest role in spreading the notoriety of the three-eyed throughout the tower. In the end, that's all they were to Yuan's eyes, whether it was Susanoo, Tsukuyomi who liked such a Susanoo, or vice versa. It was clear that the two of them liked each other. Since it's already come to this. Yuan, who had been watching the two of them awkwardly converse for a while, opened his mouth. It'll take time to control Izanagi. Yuan began by looking back at Susanoo. Susanoo, you stay by Tsukuyomi's side. You can continue to come outside for the time being. Really? The two were shocked. Yuan's words were that groundbreaking. He was allowing Susanoo, who was subordinate to him as his summon, a brief moment of freedom. Thank you. Susanoo thanked him with difficulty. But Yuan did not let his misunderstanding linger for long. Wait a minute, I think you're mistaken. Yuan shook his head. Tsukuyomi, you're the one who needs to stay close. I'll get tired if you get too far away. Me, until I get used to Izanagi. And I'd like you to help me out a bit while you're at it. Izanagi's eyes were useful. That ability showed near-perfect utility in auxiliary abilities other than combat. From Yuan's perspective, there was no better assistant than her. Help you? What are you going to do? There's something I need to find. What is it? Maple. Quote. Tsukuyomi tilted her head at the name that sounded like it would fall in autumn. She checked Susanoo's expression as if to ask what it was, but he kept his expression hardened and his mouth shut. Tsukuyomi shrugged, thinking there was no need to ask further. She could find out more about the details later, and in truth, she didn't think it mattered much what he was looking for. It was a welcome enough offer that she would be able to accompany Susanoo for the time being anyway. Okay, I'll help if there's anything I can do. I don't have anything else to do anyway. Thank you. Where are we going? Surely you're not asking me to decide the direction. I've already decided where we're going. It was delayed because of Ananta. But the destination he needed to move to had been decided. We're going outside. All of the rankers from Olympus and Asgard who had participated in the battle with Ananta. Amidst the chaos caused by the appearance of Shub-Niggurath's offspring, the rankers from Olympus and Asgard whispered among themselves. It seems like they're still around. Those goats, I remember them clearly. How could I forget? As Outer moving again, the beings that they had thought had all disappeared after their victory in the war 10 years ago, had reappeared. As the tower was abuzz with the news of their reappearance, Zeus, who was throwing spears at the sky while sweating profusely, spoke to Hades, who had come to find him. This is good, good, yes. Thanks to this, the administrators have been quiet for the past few days. At Zeus's gesture, a waiting attendant brought him a towel to wipe away his sweat. Are you aware of Outer? If not, they wouldn't have made a move at a time like this. But still, Hades looked up at the sky. I'm more afraid of those guys, too. The sky where Zeus had thrown his spear, now clear and blue, had once been purple. A purple sky that always seemed to be looking down on them. Hades often felt fear even now when he recalled it. That's probably true. Then shouldn't we take this opportunity to rest? To unite once again like that day? There's no need for that. No need. Hades tilted his head in confusion. He knew how foolish chaos had been in the past, his relationship with Zeus, and how wary Zeus was of the beings known as Outer. That's why he thought Zeus would react more sensitively than anyone else to this incident. Instead, he was reacting more calmly than ever. I don't know why, but... Hades took a sip of the drink that had been prepared with the towel. Seeing Zeus's reaction, Hades realized that he wouldn't be able to get a detailed explanation. If he was going to talk, he would have done so already. That didn't mean he was anxious about Zeus's reaction. As a brother and as an elder, he had watched over Zeus for a long time, but Zeus had never disappointed him. Complacency. Such a word could not be uttered before Zeus. There must be a reason why Zeus was reacting like that. And there was only one reason. I won't explain now, you won't understand anyway. Zeus glanced at Hades, putting down his empty glass. Thanks to that, I bought some time. Phew. Gurgling, exhaling deeply, he once again created a spear in his hand and gripped it. The fight against Ananta played back in his mind. The shock of his first astrake being blocked did not easily subside. After that day, Zeus came here every day to throw his spear. The tip of the spear began to duel, adopting a javelin stance. Zeus shone his golden eyes and threw his spear towards the clouds. It's time to sharpen it again. Rumble. Pandora and Tsukuyomi. And even Susanoo, who decided to stay outside while he was with Tsukuyomi. A total of 4 of them came down to the first floor. Thud, a giant black wall that rose to the end of the sky. Tsukuyomi, who had reached the boundary separating the tower from the outside, asked. Eru really going out here? Yeah, is that possible? Was it because the answer came too easily? Tsukuyomi still couldn't imagine going outside the tower. Since the wall cracked, and the being called Shub-Niggurath showed up in the tower from the outside. It had been revealed that the wall, which seemed like it would never collapse, could be crossed. But even if the outer came in, the inner had never gone outside. Even if it's possible, there's no way anyone would go out. It was something that had never been imagined before. Outer, existences that made even the high rankers of the tower tremble in fear. Who on earth would want to set foot in the world they roamed? The same was true for Tsukuyomi. Is that guy named Momiji out there? The fact that U1 had the name of Shub-Niggurath was something that even Tsukuyomi was hearing for the first time. However, he didn't know what the relationship was between that and the Momiji that U1 was looking for. Thud. U1 approached the wall. His heart beat faster. He had never been outside, but for some reason, it felt familiar. Let's see. The world outside the tower in Azathoth's memory. Towards that world, swish, U1 reached out his hand. Chapter 599. The hand that was reaching out towards the wall was blocked by something in the middle. Shoo shuck, a wall that was not easily penetrated. Yuan, who had been frowning, stretched out his other hand. If they didn't let him pass, he thought he would open it by force. The nameless wall identifies the target. The wall did not easily allow passage. It was natural, since it was made to prevent people from going back and forth between the outside and the inside in the first place. The outers also had to spend a long time trying to open this up. The rankers inside the tower also worked diligently to penetrate this wall of unknown origin, but in the end, no one was able to break through it. However, this is a wall that I created. At this moment, Yuan thought of the name and throne he had abandoned and moved the 2 hands he had stretched out towards the wall. So open up right now. The nameless wall is confused. The nameless wall creates a path. GIK. The wall was split in two, as if paper was being torn with both hands. There was a condition to passing through the wall. You had to have a firm belief. He was not Kim Yu-won now. He was Azathoth, the father of all things, who created this wall and the world outside. Wung, 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 wung. The other side flickered with purple light and rang endlessly. Yu-won looked back at Pandora and Tsukuyomi. Let's go. When he nodded to follow, Pandora was the first to take a step forward. Tsukuyomi paused for a moment, looking back and forth between Yu-won and the wall. Certainly, just before, it was just for a moment. The moment the wall opened, for a very short moment. She saw someone else overlapping Yu-won's figure. Wearing a robe, an unidentified man with his hood pulled back. Unlike his ordinary appearance, he felt to Tsukuyomi as if he were looking down on the world with more than just one eye. Did I see it wrong? No, can I see it wrong? Wung. The wall was still open. Tsukuyomi swallowed. How did he open that? It was a wall that no one could open, or even break. Even the outers were known to have spent a lot of time and effort trying to open the wall and get inside. But he opened it so easily. Who are you? With that question, Tsukuyomi looked back at Susanoo. A look as if to ask, do you know? At that look, Susanoo shrugged and answered. Why would I call that guy, master? Long ago, Susanoo said this when he first became subordinate to Yu-won. If you surpass me, I will recognize you as my master. In fact, Yu-won eventually succeeded in surpassing Susanoo. But if that was the end, Susanoo's attitude towards Yu-won wouldn't be like this. Is there something more? Tsukuyomi had succeeded in remembering Yu-won. But unlike Heracles and Son Goku, she didn't know everything about Yu-won. No, from the beginning, except for Pandora, who was right next to him, or Susanoo, who had become subordinate to him, perhaps no one, properly, knew Yu-won. Thud. Yu-won and Pandora. The two of them crossed the wall and walked first. As Yu-won crossed the wall, the figure of Susanoo, his subordinate, quickly opened up. Tsukuyomi, who was left alone like that, couldn't stand still any longer. Let's go, for now. Crossing the wall was a first for Yu-won as well. His great father, Azathoth, had only created the wall, but he had never crossed the wall himself. How time flowed, how far the distance was. He couldn't feel anything. Still, he felt like he had walked for quite a long time. Whoosh, like that, outside the wall that he had crossed alongside Pandora. Yu-won could smell the cold air that only remained in his memories. Phew, a desert where the wind blew quite strongly. Strangely, the sand didn't fly. The sky was a dark purple, and there were no traces of civilization to be found. It was as if a vast desert had taken the place of the ocean instead. Wow, Pandora, her eyes wide, let out a cry of admiration. It seemed like this was her first time seeing such a vast desert. Tsukuyomi, who belatedly trudged in, showed a similar reaction. Wow, don't just copy me and follow me. Thud. Walking on the sand, Yu-won looked back at Tsukuyomi. Watch your step. As soon as he finished saying that. Boom, a long, giant mouth came up, ripping through the sandy beach. Og, crash. Tsukuyomi's mouth, which had jutted out in front of her, sank back into the sand like a dolphin popping back up above the water. Tsukuyomi's eyes widened at the rare sight. There's a lot of everything. It's something you see a lot out here. Don't be surprised by everything. Tsukuyomi asked in surprise at the explanation that had been given without much thought. Do you know this place? A little bit. How? I have memories of living here. He has memories. Memories and experiences were different, but to the average listener, they couldn't help but sound like the same thing. Tsukuyomi's eyes widened at Yu-won's words that he knew this place well. Is that why? Is that why you were able to become a ranker so quickly? She was mistaken. Yu-won had lived outside of here before he had entered the tower. That was why he had been able to climb the tower so quickly, become a ranker, and fight against the outer gods. Well, not really. Did he really need to correct her misunderstanding? In the end, it was true that Dan had led him so that he could fight and defeat the outer gods. Rather than denying it, Yu-won nodded his head. Something like that. Thud. Yu-won began to walk as he answered. The desert stretched out long like the horizon. The four of them moved in a place where unknown beings would jump out from here and there. Crash. For several months, the Temple of Lightning was struck by thunder. The people living in the vicinity of the temple looked up at the flashing sky and opened their mouths. It's starting again. I wonder when it will ever end. Shish, let's listen. At first, people thought that another war had broken out. Zeus, lightning was not something that could be seen often, and for him to have taken hold of his lightning meant that there was a huge commotion. But when it went on for more than a day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, and then months, the story changed. They had gotten used to it. Thud, and Hercules, who was climbing the stairs of the temple. Crash, he looked up at the lightning that Zeus had thrown towards the sky and muttered. Is he angry? It was hard to understand him as a father. But as time went on, Hercules came to know Zeus as a person, little by little. He was a being who lived on nothing but his pride. But that pride was broken in this fight with Ananta. Thinking about it, this reaction from Zeus wasn't that strange. Thud, thud, Hercules slowly stepped into the temple, increasing his presence. In the middle, the temple rankers who approached to block his way, thinking he was an outsider, checked Hercules' face and moved out of the way. Even Hades wouldn't dare step foot in the Temple of Lightning without Zeus' permission. They had been ordered not to stop Hercules from the beginning. Rumble, until when are you going to act innocent? Zeus threw lightning towards the sky while sweating profusely. Hercules clicked his tongue as he watched him. That fight is over now. At that moment, flash, lightning bolts shot up high into the sky. Rumble, a loud noise rang in his ears. The broken lightning grazed Hercules' cheek and passed by. Drip, drip, Zeus turned his body while dripping sweat onto the floor. It's not because of that guy. You have to give a believable excuse. It's because of me. Swish, Hercules picked up the towel that the servant he had brought and left behind. Zeus' eyes sparkled even as he wiped the sweat. I was too lazy because there was nowhere to rank up further. Crackle, the power of golden lightning swirled in his hand. He was overcome with the urge to grab the spear again and throw it. Ka, however, he didn't want to show such an ugly appearance in front of Hercules. Slowly, without rushing, but he only had to give it his all. Besides, there was one more person who was in the same situation as him. Of course, it wasn't just me whose spear became dull. At Zeus' words, Hercules thought of one person. Kim Yu-won. Zeus was one of the few people who remembered him. The fact that the spear became dull was probably referring to him. I came because of that guy anyway. I thought so. You thought so. You didn't come here to build a relationship with me, did you? He hit the nail on the head. And it was a word that made his heart ache a little. Creak. Zeus gave up his seat as if he didn't even have time to wash his body. He still motioned for Hercules to sit down with an indifferent face. Tell me about it, the relationship between father and son. We should be able to build it up little by little, even like this. Heracles asked inwardly at the dry remark. Do you intend to build it up? That guy opened the wall. The wall, it was rare for Zeus to look surprised. If someone who didn't know him saw him, they would have said what was so surprising about it, but this was quite a big reaction from him. That was how groundbreaking the information that Heracles had given him was. Was he able to open it? Even the outers had spent a long time and effort to open the wall and get past it. And to think that Yu-won had opened it and gone out on his own. He had thought that there was nothing that could surprise him anymore, but this incident surprised him once again. Well, yes, but looking at how he tried it now, I guess he didn't need to open it until now. In other words, it means that he needs to open it now. There was a reason he had to open the wall and go out. Zeus interpreted the meaning of his words in this way. That guy is also looking for his own answer. Just like himself. In the fight against the administrators. And in the fight against Ananta. Yu-won must have felt the 10-year gap. And Heracles had felt the same. Yes, he's feeling a bit different. The exact starting point was right after his first fight with Ananta. His aura had become sharp like it had been 10 years ago. Yu-won had returned to that feeling from back then. It was the same this time. Just like back then, when he had always acted in ways that were difficult for Heracles to understand. Yu-won, I need to go outside for a while. Yu-won opened the wall himself and went outside. It's a good thing he came to his senses. How much that guy plays a role in the fight against the administrator will be key. Yes, but there's one more thing. Heracles continued, holding a marble-sized kit in his hand. I don't know how this guy knows about this. What are you talking about? Look at this. Swish. Saying that, Heracles showed Yu-won the message he had received. Yu-won, by the way, time outside is a bit different. After that, Yu-won added this explanation in case Heracles misunderstood. Yu-won, it's a bit late. Chapter 600. Clack. Tsukuyomi coughed and blew her nose. The cold night air penetrated her skin and chilled her to the bone. Crackle, crackle. In front of her, a hot bonfire burned brightly, sending smoke high into the sky. Tsukuyomi wasn't the only one coughing. Achoo! Opposite her, Pandora was also sneezing as she held her hands out to the bonfire. Are you okay? Are you okay? Yuan asked the two, looking at them in turn. He handed them blankets from his inventory. Tsukuyomi, wrapped in a thick blanket, finally opened her mouth to speak. The cold keeps building up. It was strange. Tsukuyomi, a high-ranker who uses ice attribute magic, had never felt cold before. Even if it was the northern sea of Muram, where winter lasted all year round and the ice never melted. But, she felt this cold on a mere desert night. It's not just the cold. Then what? I keep feeling threatened by something. So hang in there. If you make a mistake, it might even eat your mind. With those words, Yuan's gaze turned to Pandora. Slurp. Pandora was drinking hot water boiled over the bonfire. Yuan sighed as he recalled the first time he met her. I shouldn't have brought her. He was genuinely worried. She had already experienced something similar once before. Moreover, it was more severe than it was now. Above all, she had the memories of Azathoth and the power of the outer. She might not care about this much, or she might be even more distressed by the trauma of the past. How long do we have to go? Meanwhile, the deceased Susano seemed calm alone. I don't know how time is passing, but it feels like it's been more than 10 days. I don't know how far. I'm just going to go. Hey, shouldn't you tell that guy what you're looking for? Susano said, looking at Tsukuyomi, who was wrapping herself in a blanket. When she asked what danpung was, Yuan replied, you'll know when you see it. A vague answer that was difficult to understand. But it wasn't that Yuan didn't want to explain. I don't know how to explain it either. How should he explain danpung to that guy? A person the size of a palm. A formless, amorphous being. Or Azathoth. It would be difficult to explain it that way. In what form will that guy exist? Whether he exists or not. Yuan didn't know anything either. Still, there was one thing he could guess. Ubo Satla, is that danpung? When Tsukuyomi asked about his words, Yuan shook his head. No, it's not. Then, that was his house, originally. A question mark popped up over Tsukuyomi's head. Of course. Whether it was danpung or Ubo Satla, it was a difficult explanation for her. It was the outer that appeared in Nibelungen. Have you heard of it? In Nibelungen 10 years ago, a giant outer appeared, overturning the land of Nibelungen. To confront that being, which was the size of a city, Nibelungen, Yuan, and the great heavenly king had joined forces. Although people remembered the record without Yuan, the surviving survivors of Nibelungen sang songs about that day. I know, the outer of Nibelungen, we have to find that guy. I heard you caught it back then. That's right. Ubo Satla had definitely disappeared that day, on that spot. Crushed by the shapeless teeth that were Azathoth's name, not even a trace remained. However, that was just a being created by Yog Sothoth, who was there at that place. That guy wasn't originally alive. Then, Momiji, that was his house. His house, that, Yuan nodded and looked up at the sky. It was the house where the great father of this world lived. Sotos created his name after seeing it. Quote question mark quote. That was Ubo Satla, a foolish creator with no form. Ubo Satla foolish. Tsukuyomi felt like grabbing her head and tearing it off. The great father, Sotos. Ubo Satla, a foolish creator with no form. Even though she was clearly listening to the explanation, there weren't many words she could understand. I can't understand a single thing you're saying. That's what I said. I told you that you wouldn't understand even if I told you. Waruk. Yuan chuckled and raised the flames. Ignites the flames of death and decay. As the flames grew larger, the bodies of Tsukuyomi and Pandora, who had been shivering, began to melt. The flames of death and decay. The magnitude of its name was so great that even the spirits of the outer beings dared not approach. Feeling comfortable, Pandora was soon dozing off. Yuan put her head on his shoulder and said, "Close your eyes for a bit and let's move again." Thud. A man in a robe slowly walked through the sand. Slow and leisurely steps. Yuan suddenly came to his senses at the majesty felt in those small steps. "We're here." Me. The sound of a mountain goat could be heard from behind. A familiar cry. Yuan, who turned around to look at the mountain goat, suddenly came to his senses. This isn't my memory. He couldn't control his body on his own. The moment he thought it was a dream, his feet began to move again. Chabak. He walked down the sloping sandy beach, leading the mountain goat and a child home. A cave that led underground. He followed the familiar path and brought the mountain goat and the child. Do you need something to eat? He looked down at the child. As the child, who had been watching, nodded, Yuwon's body moved. I'll go look for it. Take your time and look around. Me. The mountain goat grabbed the child's body and pulled. As if it were a senior. It was telling him to follow. You must follow closely. You might lose your way. The child nodded again. Nyarlathotep followed Shub-Niggurath like that. Jebek, Yuwon's body, the great father of the world, Azathoth, walked around his house like that. To find something for Nyarlathotep to eat. As he went inside. Are you well? Blink, blink, thud. Countless eyes and mouths blinked and opened their mouths as if to greet him. My children. Pot. He woke up with a start from the nightmare. He turned his head at the rustling sound and saw that he was sleeping with his head against Pandora's. Are you awake? Susanoo's voice. He stood behind the three sleeping people, his sword half drawn. As if standing guard. Did you fall asleep? I can't believe I fell asleep like this. I don't even know when I fell asleep. Susanoo spoke to Yuwon's bewildered mumbling. It was strange. What was? It was too sudden, so sudden that I wondered if you had fainted instead of falling asleep. Yuwon nodded at his words. It was strange. He didn't think about sleeping, and he wasn't tired from not getting enough rest or from fighting. It wasn't like his mental strength was so weak that he couldn't even hold back a little sleepiness. That dream. His brows furrowed deeply as his thoughts deepened. Soto's. Thinking deeply, a deep line appeared between Yuwon's eyebrows. Pandora, Tsukuyomi. Yuwon hurriedly woke the two who were sleeping. The two, who had been in a deep sleep for a long time, opened their eyes. Tsukuyomi rubbed her eyes and asked. Why? We need to hurry. Yuwon looked across the desert. Before the dream, he couldn't tell where anything was. But now, strangely enough, the path that had looked the same for more than 10 days looked different. It doesn't seem far. Pot, Shwa. The middle of the desert split and the four began to move quickly. Yuwon was in the lead, with Pandora following closely behind. And Susanoo, who was running while carrying Tsukuyomi on his back. Tsukuyomi looked at Yuwon's back, who was running in one direction at a fast pace, unlike before. What's so fast? It was difficult to follow him because she was on Susanoo's back. That was how much Yuwon was moving with all his might. It was so close that the other party could barely keep up. As if he's sure of the way. She wondered why he had woken up the party who had been in a deep sleep and where he was going in such a hurry. Passus. Yuwon, who had been advancing quickly, stopped and signaled behind him. The speed slowed down slowly. At the same time, Tsukuyomi infused magic into her eyes. Eyes of Izanagi, is activated. Chuchuchut, things that were invisible were seen in the white eyes. Beneath the empty desert, something huge was squirming. Here they come, Yuwon and Tsukuyomi said at the same time. And that moment, Puwa, a huge earthworm sprang up from the desert. Yuwon and Tsukuyomi, who had known it from the beginning, drew their swords and swung them. Scratch. The outer body, which was divided into 4 parts, fell to the floor without even screaming. The sand of the desert sucked the outer body into the sand as if it had found prey it hadn't seen in a long time. However, the opponent was not alone. Quadruple A, otherworldly beings constantly screaming and rising. As if they had the same purpose, they blocked Yuwon and his party and showed up on the desert. This is. Tsukuyomi's eyes scanned the front. Even after crossing the wall, she had used Izanagi to examine this world several times. Thanks to that, she knew that there were nameless outers living all over the desert. She knew that they existed everywhere, but this was a bit too much. There are too many. I couldn't understand what they were saying. However, they, who had an irregular form, blocked the party's path without exception, crying the same cry. How many of them were there? This whole desert was them. Crunch. Yuwon moved his steps, which had stopped for a moment, and looked up at them. He was going to go quickly because he knew the way, but they were blocking him. He seemed a little angry, wondering who would do such a thing. I guess I left it empty for a while, so you thought it was your house. And that moment, for a long time, Yuwon's other name, which he thought he would no longer need, shone. The adversary of the otherworld, reveals his name. Sotothea.